Hello, hey, what's up? And welcome to the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist. And the only thing that matters is film. We're back again. We're here for September. Happy September. And there's Jay. I'm Cole. It's been a bit of a while, but
We're back.
we're back. We say it a lot because we have all these like pauses and stuff. But that's okay. That's all right. We're feeling good about it, Tim. Feeling good about tonight. Like a lot of times when we've been off for a while, it's always difficult deciding on what movie to come back with and trying to coordinate. We had some ideas that fell through that maybe we'll be able to get to later. I kind of pulled this one kind of out of nowhere, but it is interesting to think that we hadn't done any films by the director Guillermo del
Really?
Toro.
We haven't
The
done
next,
any.
we've talked about a lot of them,
Wow.
but not
I
like
think we're
directly as the
we're both
subject.
like pretty big fans of his, right?
Yeah, like I said, so we found ways to tie him to other things and talk about him. But I mean, and
We
this,
got to fix that. There's so many of his I'd love to do
yeah,
on here.
I mean, I really wanted to do Devil's Backbone, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that. That was the one I really wanted to do, not just because obviously I think it'd be good to talk about, but also because it's been a long time since I've seen it. I picked this one because it's the only one I own. Although I came very close the other day to buying a really lovely Blu-ray of Crimson Peak, which I like a lot. I think when that movie came out, some people kind of dismissed it. They were a little disappointed. It wasn't what they wanted. But it's I've always really liked it. I'm just a fan of that sort of gothic ghost story type
I
thing.
think
I
it
know
was
we took
bad advertising, I think is what hurt that one. They kind of you know, talked about it as more of like a spooky ghost story when it's really not.
I mean, it's true that some of his movies are kind of maybe hard to market because of that, because of the way they straddle genres. But I mean, that's one of the things that makes him interesting to me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm a big fan of him, and it's really great to see the things that he's interested are a lot like the things I'm interested in, and the things he touched on. Like I remember years ago when they were talking when after Hideo Kojima had left Konami, and they were talking about like Death Stranding. It's like he's gonna do a game with Guillermo del Toro. Like I love that they're friends and they're
Yeah.
gonna work together. Like that was so cool to me. Um, and obviously Guillermo del Toro is also friends with comic book artist Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, and he directed the original two Hellboy movies and directed Blade. So that's all just so really cool to me. So it seems to me like I would have a good time talking to Guillermo del Toro. I think we have a lot of the same sensibilities. Plus,
Yeah.
I know we talked about this before too, but it's been a long time. But I mean, one of my favorite kinds of fiction, is like sort of like dark fantasy, but not this dark fantasy, but sometimes dark fantasy that maybe even has like a whimsical fairy tale edge to it in a way. We'll talk about it as we go through the movie, and some of these other movies and stories that you can compare it to. So I really think that Guillermo del Toro and I would have a lot in common and things to talk about.
Sure.
I forgot to bring it out here. Here's the movie itself. This is my really old DVD of it. I never got a Blu-ray, but I'll have to. But there's the old 2-disc DVD of it.
Nice.
But I've got the Criterion Blu-ray for a movie that we did here a long time ago in like our first season or whatever. We did the animated film Watership Down. So if you have the Criterion of that Watership Down, in the extra features, there's a little featurette where Guillermo del Toro talks about the movie, which is pretty cool. So again, it shows something that he was obviously a fan of and influenced by.
Is
Incidentally, yeah, go ahead.
is that DVD Criterion?
No,
They
this
did
is
put a
just
Criterion out. I believe I've got a Blu-ray that's not as well, but Criterion did release a version of
Labyrinth,
this.
yeah, or
I'm not
yeah,
sure of
Pan's Labyrinth.
what format. Probably 4K
This
by
is
now. Who knows?
Yeah. And I was just saying, sagging into 4K, like a couple of years ago, they had announced this really nice 4K edition of Watership Down, and it had all this beautiful art and boxes, and then it got canceled. But just recently, it's like either a different version. But anyway, it's coming back, and I'm really on the fence because I mean, when you already own a Criterion of something, do you really need to get another thing? And I can't even watch 4K anyway. But since I love that movie so much, I'm still sort of wondering if I should get it. But yeah, this is the New Line 2-disc Platinum series.
Well, just do what I did. Like, just buy 4Ks that come with a Blu-ray, and then you'll get a player
Yeah,
eventually. That's
yeah,
kind of what I.
that's what
Yeah.
all the 4Ks I have so far are.
Yeah.
A couple of anime like Akira and Ghost in the Shell. I've got Blade Runner and the Blade Runner sequel. I've got all those 4K because they also came with ordinary Blu-ray discs, and there might even be a couple more. Oh, I have the original Alien. I've got that 4K.
Yeah,
because that was really cheap. That's like the cheapest 4K I
too.
ever bought. It was like
that's a great
25.
4K too. It looks really good in 4K.
That's cool. So yeah, this is my first time in a long time just dusting off this old one. This is again one of this is a movie that came out in 2006. So I imagine I know I had this in 2007 because I know where I was in 2007 and where I was in 2008, different places. So I got this when it was fairly new. It's even possible, now that I think about it, that I bought this at a Blockbuster when it was going out of business. I kind of want to think. Because there's a Blockbuster in Halifax that I never went to, even when I lived here in the early years, because I wasn't close to it, and because obviously video difference, which I've blabbed about before. But when I was living, so there was a period in 2005 to 2007 where I was living in a different neighborhood from anywhere else, because all the time I lived in Halifax, I kind of always lived in the same general area, except that 2-year period. I lived in a different part that was closer to downtown, and that was near that store. So I'm thinking maybe I got this there. That's how I think that's how I remember it. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, real quick before we get too deep in here, I'm wearing my Master Splinter shirt today in honor of Peter Renaday's passing.
Oh,
the original voice of Splinter.
Oh wow,
he was 89.
That's a long life. A couple other people passed away recently.
James Earl Jones, that's a big one.
Obviously, that's the big one.
Yeah,
the big one, James Earl Jones. But there was somebody else. Oh, there was John Cassaday. He was a comic book artist, so a little lesser known, but really good artist. I don't even know when he died of. I'll have to look into it because he wasn't old. But yeah, that's the other one.
Who's the Iron Eagle guy? I can't think of his name.
The director?
No, the actor. Louis Gossett Jr. He passed away a couple weeks ago as well.
I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, he was super old too. So I mean,
yeah,
you really, you lived at 90 or whatever. That's good for you.
I mean, but yeah, James Earl Jones is one of those legendary people. What's funny is just a couple days before his death, I actually watched a movie he's in. I watched. I think a lot of people forget that he's in it, even though it's one of the big famous movies of all time. I watched Dr. Strangelove, which he's in.
I didn't realize he was in that either.
He's one of the pilot guys. He's one of the guys on the bombers.
He's done so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many things that people think of Star Wars immediately, but it's so many movies that I prefer over that with him in it.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. He's really iconic as a voice. He's Darth Vader. He's Mufasa. But I mean, he was a actor with a physical presence too, right? So it's kind of cool that before he died, I watched the movies that he actually physically appears in that.
Conan the Barbarian, he's great in that.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Arnold Schwarzenegger about him talking about how.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said, people already know what a great actor and everything he was. So I'll just talk about how nice he was. He said, it was 1982, I'm brand new. And he said he was just so nice to work with, and he was always encouraging and trying to help me out. So, yeah.
I mean, Field of Dreams.
I hate that movie,
off the top of the dome. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is what it is.
I don't hold it against him. It's not like
he's great in it.
But yeah.
Let me tell you, speaking of Jess, people over in Jess's area love that movie because it was shot over there somewhere in his neck of the
movie's supposed to be in Iowa. Was it shot in Iowa or was it shot somewhere else? Because I know it's supposed to be in Iowa.
I don't know.
They say Iowa like 50 times. In that movie. Is this heaven? No.
I only know that because Jess took pictures at the actual site, like where the cornfield was and everything.
That's if you go back to IMDb, I don't know if it's still there. That's like one of the earliest movie reviews I ever wrote where I just tear into something. So my username on IMDb was Silver Creature. So if anybody wants to look, there might be like a super old, like mid 2000s scathing review of that movie calling it a bunch of garbage.
My name on there was Dead Requiem. And I think I had one review and it was for the Dark Water remake. And
That's interesting.
I think I've since deleted that because I wasn't happy with it. But
It's Jennifer Connelly.
yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that.
she's
Just 'cause I
great.
love her.
I mean,
Yeah,
the
I love
movie
her.
sucks compared to the original, but that's with all those J remakes.
Yeah, that's right. But no, I did a handful of movie reviews back in the day. I remember I did one for Troy, for instance.
How did that go?
20 fucking years. I mean, I mostly kind of defended it. And I also said like that at the time, a lot of people were just blathering about it because of the sex appeal, because like Brad Pitt was like,
Pitt, yeah,
showing a lot of skin and stuff like that. But and I kind of tried to say that didn't matter. The main thing I'll say, I still like Troy, but I never understood why they wanted to take all the supernatural elements out of it. For some reason, they just wanted to make Troy as if it was like a historical movie.
That's not a good idea. That's that's the stuff I like, about the book.
Yeah. Like they spend their time like debunking everything. It's like to the point that like Achilles is like super atheistic, right? He's like yelling at everybody that there aren't any fucking gods, even though his mother is like semi-divine technically. But
and he just cuts his own heels.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Like the whole thing is like he was dipped in the river Styx by the heel. The heel was the only thing. In the movie, they're like, we'll show you what. They're treating as if this was a historical event that really happened that turned into legend, which isn't true at all. Because remember, he gets shot through the heel with an arrow, which brings him down, and then he gets shot like a bunch of other times fatally. It's like, oh, so that's why. And it shows that he broke the arrows off, but only couldn't get the one in his foot or something. It's really stupid. I remember like Orlando Bloom like kind of regretted the movie because they made Paris like a big time coward, and he didn't like playing such a coward. But like, you got to do it.
Was it that kind of what Paris was though?
Not really. I mean, he wasn't a great warrior, and I mean, he definitely made his mistakes. But I don't think the Iliad has him cowering the way they have it, because they have this whole thing where Hector goes out to fight for him. And he's like, no, Hector, I'll do it. And he's trying to fight the old guy, and the old guy is beating the hell out of him. He's supposed to kill him, and he runs back and grabs Hector's leg, and Hector kills him. Like, that's not in the Iliad. Where, like, this idea that Paris had agreed to honorable one-on-one combat, but when he was beaten, he pushed out and got his brother to kill the guy for him. Like, that's not what happened. I keep saying the guy, Menelaus. Menelaus would be the
that ruined Orlando Bloom's career. Ruined it.
Yeah. Actually, I think what ruined his career was like finally not doing like fantasy and period pieces. Like this is a movie I still want to do on here.
He was Pirates and he was Lord of the Rings, right? And then
and then he did Troy, which again seemed like a pretty good fit. That movie's not really remembered or as successful as those, but it was a big fit. Now he's like a Greek pretty boy hero or whatever you want to call it. But ages ago we did the Cameron Crowe film. It's Cameron Crowe, isn't it? Almost Famous, right? This Cameron Crowe.
Right.
And the follow-up, I think, a few years later, because Almost Famous was like 2000, so I don't know what Cameron Crowe would be in between. But the same year as this film's 2006, they did the film Elizabethtown, which most people don't like or care about. And I feel like part of that was like it was jarring to see Orlando Bloom not only play like a contemporary human being living in modern times, but also with like he tried to do like an American accent. And I think a lot of people were just weirded out by that. They were too used to him having some sort of version of his natural Australian accent or adapted to make himself sound like an ancient or mythical thing. And, they're used to seeing him shooting arrows and fighting pirates and stuff. And now he's just like some 21st century guy, I still like that movie, but I get why like it probably didn't do so well.
Yeah. I've watched it because you recommended it.
Yeah. Like I think I get why it doesn't.
It's a fine movie.
It falls short. It can't succeed the way something as amazing Almost Famous was. But I think that movie gets a bad rap. And I do think it does go a little out of its way. It tries really hard to sort of be whimsical and stuff. And you can take or leave Kirsten Dunst's character, but she reminds me of somebody I knew in real life a bit, so I could kind of stand it. But anyway, I wouldn't mind doing that movie someday. It's actually a pretty cool role for Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin only has like one scene at the beginning where he's at the beginning he's like the owner of the whole, because the whole thing get kicked off is that he works for like some sneaker company. He's a designer, and he designed this awful shoe that was such a failure that it like cost them like hundreds of millions of dollars. And it all starts with them blaming him entirely. I'm like, people had to okay this, but for the sake of the movie, it's all his fault. And he has like a one-on-one conversation with the CEO of the company. It's Alec Baldwin. And he's trying to explain to him like the depth of his, like the guy feels bad enough already, but he tries to explain to him like the depth of his failure to lose like hundreds of million to like close to $1 billion or something, put it all on him. Then he goes home and tries to commit suicide by like putting a knife on some weird exercise machine to make it stab himself. But then, he gets a call about his friend getting married or whatever. And that's where the plot kicks off.
Man, what an odd way to do that.
Yeah, it's really odd. But it's pretty good that I remember that well, because it's been many years since I've seen that movie. But I do stick up for a bit. But I do think there were a couple things. One, it tried too hard to be whimsical. And two, I do think Orlando Bloom, I'm not even going to say he was miscast. I just think in 2006, with what he had behind him and what he had ahead of him, I think a lot of people just couldn't really take him in a role like that. It was too weird and off-putting. Like, you have to ease into it more like Daniel Radcliffe did, I think. Anyway.
Well, last night I watched the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, Trap.
Yeah, I watched it.
Josh Hartnett.
The first time he's popped up in ages. I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah, I like him too, so it's a shame. Yeah, he was talking about Elizabethtown, Jacob.
Yeah, he must have come in partly through it. Yeah, we were talking about Elizabethtown. Orlando Bloom.
He's watched enough to know you bring that movie up a lot. But Trap was too long. Was okay. Messy third act. He tries to feature like his other daughter, not the director of the other movie that came out, The Watchers, I think it's called, that came out earlier in the year.
This is the pop.
His other daughter.
This is the pop star daughter, who isn't that big of a star in real life.
This huge pop star, which is so much of that in there. It's just, I mean, it's realistic because that's how awful that shit is, but it's a little too much of it for me. But I get it, trying to showcase his daughter.
I don't know. I felt like once the movie leaves the concert, that's when it starts to really suck. I feel like the movie really has no direction when to leave the concert.
Oh, that's right. You saw it. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah.
I saw it before you did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm biased. I've gone on record. I don't like anything Shyamalan has ever done.
Anything?
Nothing. I mean, it ranges. Some I absolutely hate. Others I'm just like, well, that was pretty bad. But no, I don't like anything he did. Nothing. I remember I used to like Signs, but it doesn't hold up as like, it doesn't hold up to rewatch. You're just like, and I mean, this is the other thing. He's been making movies for 20 some years. Has he ever had a conversation with a person in his fucking life? Does he have any concept of how human beings talk to each other?
Dialogue.
I can understand your first couple movies, your dialogue being bad, but can't he improve even a little? And I know the big defense of this movie will basically be like, well, Josh Hartnett's not like a normal guy. The whole point is he's going to struggle to talk and act normal. But I mean, I don't think so, because what I've gotten from the movie is like the impression that actually he fits in just fine. It's only when stuff starts to fall apart during this movie that he would struggle. So I don't know. Shyamalan's kind of the same thing most of his movies. He comes up with a concept that sounds good on paper, and then he just completely drops the ball executing it. And he does it in the same way almost every time, and he's always got weird one-note characters that show up just to be quirky and say ridiculous things and then just exit off stage. It's nice to see Haley Mills again, I guess, who I used to have a crush on back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
But not just as her then she would have been like 40, like, it's like Good Morning Bliss Miss. But I loved her like kid version because of the Disney movies I would watch on Family Channel, like The Parent Trap and stuff like that, and Pollyanna. Like, I liked her in that too when I was about that age.
Do you think when he casted her, like The Parent Trap, the name had anything to do with any of this, or was that just a total coincidence?
I can't imagine, this movie's like a more conventional trap. Parent Trap's sort of more of a joke. I can't imagine. him saying, "Oh, well, they both have trap with this."
So,
I mean, I don't know.
as I saw it in the trivia like 5 times, it's like, oh, she was in the Parent Trap. I was like, yeah, no shit. I mean, but is it?
He sure loves his like short one-word titles too. I mean, Unbreakable's not short, so we won't count it. But you've got like Trap and Devil, and I know there's several that now, of course, I'm going to blank on, but there's quite a few. Trap, Devil, Old,
Signs.
Signs.
What's the in the woods one where they're all in the woods and Village? I guess that's not one word.
Well, that's the Village. So, I mean, he's. I know there's more from recent years that I'm just blanking on, but it doesn't matter.
I don't see a similarity between M. Night and Lynch at all.
Yeah, like you said, he actually understands creating a surreal. Like, I don't think M. Night is capable of creating any kind of world. I've never felt like any of his worlds were, in fact, it felt like he goes out of his way to like create a mundane, everyday world and then throw like weird stuff into it, which again, that doesn't sound bad on paper. It sounds doable. I just think he's fucking terrible at it. Especially when he has like reasons for like his like trying to back up some of the mythology. The worst example is definitely Lady of the Water. Everything in Lady of the Water is just random stuff pulled out of the air that's just backed up by like a book. It's got weird stuff. You got like a kid like reading secret messages off cereal boxes for no fucking reason, and like no
the guy
no
with
thought was
the
put
big
into
arm. The guy with the big arm.
And I get anytime you're making up a mythology or something, like put some effort into what you call things. It's like that's a nerf and that's a Slargle and that like it sounds like there was no thought put into the names of anything. And that movie is ridiculous. But like, how about like Devil? Devil's supposed to be like about like religious terror, like the idea of like an actual like biblical version of the devil existing. Like the whole thing is he's got like this Hispanic security guard who's monitoring the whole situation, and he like he does the toast test. He like drops toast. He's like, "Oh my god, it is the devil." Because my nana or whatever said like when the devil's around, toast always lands like jelly side down or something. If in a normal movie you play that off as like a joke, but it's supposed to be taken completely seriously in Devil. It's supposed to be like, there's your confirmation, actual fucking devil, the devil of the Bible and Christian mythology. It is him because of the jelly toast thing. Like I can't fucking believe it.
I mean, after Lady in the Water and what was the fucking the trees, the Mark Wahlberg one? That was
The Happening. Those are probably the easiest to make fun of. Is probably Lady in the Water.
Those two like stinkers, like really, kind of. I don't know if it, kind of didn't ruin his career, obviously, but like I think the guy makes watchable movies. Like I think Trap is a watchable movie for a one-off. It's not something I'm going to buy. It's not something I'm ever going to watch again. I thought it was fine. I wasn't. I mean, there's lots of movies this year that I've been, less satisfied with.
The only thing Trap did well is that I guess it did sort of keep me guessing because it's the way I don't want to give anything away or spoilers, but it's just like the movie almost like has like 3 different phases. Like it's like at first it seems like the main character is the daughter, and it's like obviously the father's the main character, but it's like, oh wait, the pop star is the main character, and then it shifts back to him again. It's like it's a little bit weird who we're supposed to be following. I feel like anything that took place outside should have just been the very end, like the last like 15 minutes. I couldn't believe that you're only like 45 minutes into the movie and it's like, okay, we're at his concert now. Concert's over. It's like, what? What are you even going to do at this point?
They could have done that concert in 20 minutes, screen time. Like, I don't need to see full performances of whatever the fuck's going on. Like, whatever Taylor Swift rip off bullshit they've got. I hate that kind of music, and I hate that. I hate that everything about that. So,
like, one of the people they used on that was a real pop star. I'd heard the name.
Oh,
some guy they got on stage.
Kid Cudi was one of the guys.
Kid Cudi, yeah, that's it, Kid Cudi.
Because I thought it was Terry Crews at first with a wig on.
I was like, people think this is good. Like I've completely lost touch, which is
he was good in
reaching middle age.
Oh shit! What's the the first Maxine movie?
X.
Was it X? Yeah. Kid Cudi was the porn star in that one. So I thought
in that he's just playing a role. He's acting. But in this, he's playing another pop star. It's like people think this is good, and I'm like, in reading about it, again, I want to get to Pan's Labyrinth, but in reading about it, Like it's a, the music was such an important part because it was all about making, like it was talked about like how his daughter, the pop who plays the pop star, how it was important to her to like write music and have songs that would be like evocative of the feel of the movie. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It just don't tell me how her songs have anything to do with actually what's happening in the plot. That's such a goddamn reach.
Well, she made an entire album, which is the soundtrack for this movie.
Yes.
So that's
I mean, that's the reason the movie exists. Like,
right.
He wants to like promote her career, and then he sort of builds a sketchy kind of plot around it that doesn't really work. And Josh Hartnett is either so bored or so out of work that he's like, okay, I'll go against every actor's instinct and be this ridiculous character.
I don't think the last thing he did was that TV show on Showtime, Penny Dreadful.
Okay. I've heard of it. I had no idea.
That was the last. I watched the first couple seasons. It was okay.
I liked him when he was something of a, I don't know what you want to say star, but he was a known actor in the 2000s.
Like Lucky Number 11 is pretty good.
Yeah.
All the post, Scream stuff, H2O stuff is better, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's not always a lead
like
guy. They paired him up in a movie with Harrison Ford that didn't really work out, Hollywood Homicide. I think that was supposed to be like kind of big launching thing for him, but it wasn't a very good movie.
I never saw it.
It's fine, I'm always a little soft on something with Ford because he's my favorite actor, but I mean, it's a pretty mediocre movie, and it explains, why it wasn't sort of like a launching pad for Hartnett. Again, I don't know if you really blame Hartnett. It just shows like how much timing and luck comes into these sorts of things. Hartnett certainly has a lot of qualities. He's a handsome guy, and it was at least not without acting talent. I don't think it'd be like, oh, he wasn't a good enough actor to go for. Sometimes you need certain breaks and certain things to fall your way.
No, I like Hartnett. That's one of the reasons I wanted to watch it. But
same here. It's fun because me, I don't like Shyamalan at all, right? But I was like, I'm curious enough to watch this to see Hartnett because I haven't seen him in a million years. And I mean, I don't understand how these actors completely give themselves over to Shyamalan's direction, but they do because I see them be good in other things. But then they're like, okay, I'm in Shyamalan's world now. I'll do whatever he tells me, even if it goes against every acting. Like, I don't think Marky Mark's a good actor, but he's a better actor than what you see in The Happening, for Christ's sake. He's better than that.
The fucking trees over here.
What? No. Random guy blathering about hot dogs.
Go punch something and fight a robot or something, That's what you need to do. That's what you're good at.
Anyway, yeah, I don't want to turn to a big thing about Shyamalan, but I mean, I like nothing by Shyamalan. I mean, Jacob mentioned Split. Split's okay, I guess. It's the closest thing I can say to good by him. I never liked the premise to begin with. Like a lot of people are always like, what about Unbreakable? Like, I hate Unbreakable. So
I like that whole
we're already
trilogy.
starting from a bad place. Yeah, we're already starting from a bad place. I don't like Unbreakable. Unbreakable makes me want to gouge my eyes out. It's so slow. It makes me hate Bruce Willis, who I've always liked Bruce Willis. I hate him in those movies. I hate his slow, lifeless delivery. It just drives me nuts. I will never watch Old. I can tell you that. I've seen enough.
Old is a piece of fucking shit.
Yeah. So I don't know. Shyamalan. One more thing I'll say about him. Like, speaking of, you were saying like how it was probably The Happening in Lady in the Water torpedoing his career. That's like late 2000s, right? Like, I need to nail down the years for those.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe 2009, something like that.
Because, I mean, what's interesting is I think in 2010 or 2011, what happened was he had various projects, again, because, the type of guy he is. He had various projects he wanted to do, and no studio would touch him because he'd had some flops, right? So then he got offered that Avatar: The Last Airbender movie, and it was basically just to sort of get him something, because studios weren't going to trust him to like write his own thing. They're like, here, just direct this known intellectual property, and he directed it, and it was a horrible flop, and that set him back even more. So I'm kind of amazed he was able to come back from that, because he had a couple of movies where he lost the faith of the studios. Like, no more of your craziness. Here, just take a movie as is that somebody else wrote of, something based on a popular property and a really popular show, and do it. And like the movie it's a terrible, terrible movie.
I haven't seen it, but
I'm
I
not
thought
even,
people liked that movie, but I have no idea. Okay.
Not only do people not like that movie, but it's not just like fans of the show, because I never really watched the show, but a lot of people say that's one of the better shows of the era. I never got into it, but it's hated by both. It's hated by fans of the show and just random people. Like, no, I would tell you, don't even watch that movie out of curiosity. It is so bad. It is so poorly done. It's really something. But if you do know even a little bit about the show, you'll be really disappointed in how cheap and crappy its effects are and stuff like that.
Well, apparently he's self-financing all of his stuff now. I don't know if he finances it himself.
That's kind of what he's been reduced to, right? Because he was the hot director for a few years.
Does he sell it like at a screening or something at a festival? Is that how that works, or does he distribute the whole thing himself?
He's still a name that counts for something with some people, right? So I'm sure there must be producers that are willing to take something of a chance on him. But I remember that was like, again, that was almost 15 years ago. He was kind of at a crossroads where he'd done a few flops in studio. He had lost the faith of studios, and that's what Last Airbender was. It was kind of them throwing him a bone, saying, "We don't trust you with your own project anymore. You're just going to direct this movie." Yeah. And like again, I won't blame the entire thing on him, but it didn't help that it was a terrible, terrible movie. But I don't know. He's still a name that commands some respect, and I mean, so many people were so excited about Split because like finally the sequel to to Unbreakable that was really good.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's okay, but anyway, we talk way too much about him. I'd rather talk about Del Toro, who I think is a great filmmaker with a much cooler body of work. So Pan's Labyrinth, a dark fantasy, but it's not entirely fantasy world set because it straddles the real world too. Mm-hmm. I'm usually less of a fan of that, but one of the people who's the best at doing it is him, because there's fantasies where you have real world and then fantastic elements come into it, and then you have real world where it straddles a line between there's a fantasy kind of realm and the real world, and they brush up against each other, which is pretty much what this is. And then of course there's like Lord of the Rings or something where it's just complete fantasy environment. That's what I like best, but obviously you can do any version of it if you're good at it. And this is one of my favorite versions of sort of like real world bumping up against the fantastic world. I like it very much, set in an interesting time period, which Del Toro obviously has an interest in, because I think it's around the same time period as the movie we mentioned before, The Devil's Backbone, which would be like
43.
I think it's supposed to be the summer. It's the summer of 44, so it's very early Francoist Spain. So I'm not going to blab too much about wars and historical context, but I'll do a little bit of my shtick, which is sometimes when we talk about let's think like during World War II, it's 1944, but Spain was infamously neutral during World War II, which is even weirder when you look into the details of it, because I've talked before about World War II, of course, how World War II was such a big conflict that it actually absorbed some other conflicts that had started beforehand, one being the Winter War, which was the Russians invading Finland. That happened before World War II kicked off, but then it was part of World War II before it was settled. So, which is kind of interesting. I don't want to go too far, but the Russians were technically on the side of the Allies, but they're still the bad guys, Finns. So there was a point during the Winter War where the Finns were technically on the same side as the Nazis, but they weren't really, because they weren't collaborating with the Nazis. They were just fighting the Russians at the same time.
Right.
Anyway, and another one, of course, I've mentioned this many times because of China, but was the second Sino-Japanese War, where Japan had invaded China. That happened a couple years beforehand, and then eventually got folded into World War II. Infamously, or interestingly, I guess I'll say, I don't know if it's infamous because I don't know, but my own feeling on it, it's kind of interesting that the Spanish Civil War didn't. The Spanish Civil War, I think, started in 1936, maybe 35, and it finished in 39, about 5 months before World War II started. So it didn't get folded into it. But it does seem weird for a couple reasons. And one is that before World War II started and this conflict was going on, which was basically between the Francoists, who I'll just call fascists, and if you want to have problems with that, fine. You want to get technical and you want to say that it's actually, a different technically a different sort of well, ideology. I'd be like, maybe really technically, but I still think if it basically falls, it hits all. I think it hits all the beats. It hits all the buttons for fascism and against the socialists or whatever like that. But what's interesting is that because they were doing this sort of brand of fascism, so before World War II even started, they actually had support from Nazi Germany and from fascist Italy. So it's kind of interesting that even though they helped them win their war, and that's where this movie starts, like they had won. The nationalists have won, is what's going on here. It's not during the war. The war is already, it's during World War II, which Spain isn't part of, but we're in the mop-up part where technically the nationalists have won the war, but they're still fighting against rebels, which is what this movie is. But I just always found it interesting that they managed to stay neutral. You'd think they would be obligated to help the Germans and Italians out, considering they helped them during their war, but somehow they managed to stay neutral.
That's what I was going to ask. Were they not part of it because they just didn't have the resources, because they had just wrapped up a civil war of their own, so they weren't really in the position?
Perhaps maybe that could be part of their justification, right? They could say, you know, as we said, technically at this point the war has been over for several years, but they're still dealing with, you know, resistance. I mean, spoilers, people, but the sad news for history is that this continued right, like the nationalists remained in party right up till Franco's death in 1975. So they did not shake off these fascists for the next, 30 years, unfortunately. Although they did have some small victories at, like it's depicted in this movie. But yeah, so at this point, yeah, the Civil War is over and done with. You know, it's stated by the captain himself. It's like, it's over. We won. They lost. Why can't they get it through their heads? But there's also a part where you see the rebels and you see that they're following closely what's going on in the rest of Europe. I think they're reading an article about D-Day. And I also have to wonder, like, did they think the Allies were going to help them if they could win the war? It seems like that to me, that maybe they thought if the Allies, took care of business and beat the Axis powers, then they would help fix Spain. But of course, that's not what happened. Again, like very complicated diplomatic reasons for that, I'm sure. And as you said, I'm not even sure what the reasoning was to keep Spain out of the war in the first place. Perhaps they were able to convince them that, yeah, we don't have the resources. We've just been through our own civil war. We're in, we're still in a state of upheaval. We can't afford to get involved in another conflict. I don't know. I didn't look deeply into that, but that's one of the things I always thought was interesting, because I think about some of those wars that were going on in the 30s that eventually got absorbed into the larger conflict of World War II. The Spanish Civil War is not one of them. But Franco of Spain, they followed something called the Phalangist movement. And you can make arguments that Phalangism is separate from fascism. To me, it's just fascism in another flavor. It's anti-democratic, it's anti-communist, it's anti-liberal, it's pro-authoritarian. To me, it's just fascist of a different name or color, as far as I'm concerned. And certainly, that's how you see these guys behave in this movie. And the captain, of course, is the best example of that.
No, he's like the embodiment of evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but he's also the embodiment of the evil in sort of that fascist image, right? He's always he's got his meticulous uniform on. He's a stickler about rules and hierarchy and details. He's checking his watch all the time. You could project that image onto, say, a Nazi officer. You can project that image onto like a brown shirt working for Mussolini or Mussolini himself. It's a very similar, if not identical, archetype. So anyway, it's interesting that we have that as the backdrop for this movie, where you've got that as the backdrop going up into this.
It's got a lot going against it, at least for having success in the West, because it's foreign language, it's historical, know. So that's two big strikes against it. I'm sure studios, he didn't give a shit what studios cared, at this point, because he'd been through Mimic and all that, so he was kind of done with studios.
And I mean, you could even say it has going against it. Like, I think even in 2006, there were people that would see fantasy as something that couldn't be serious or dark, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you had any inkling of fantasy and its history and darkness, but I mean, I do think there are people that are just like, seeing like this should have been like a kids movie, but instead you've got like fascists beating people to death and and war and stuff like that. Like, no, this was never a kids movie. It just has a kid protagonist. And I think even now, all these years later, there are people that get kind of that stuff confused in their brain, like they can't separate it, which is kind of sad. But yeah, luckily the movie was a big success, right? Like, even though it had all these things going against it, there were a lot of people that liked it and did got it. It was a big success, and it won some Oscars.
Special effects, I hope.
Let's see which Oscars it won.
It's Doug Jones,
Academy
right?
Awards.
I'm assuming it's Doug Jones because that's his
Doug
guy.
Jones. Yeah, that's Doug Jones
Not
as the
fluent in
Fawn.
Spanish.
No, but give him credit. So for playing the role of the Fawn, Doug Jones did learn his lines in Spanish, even though they dubbed him over with a different voice, and it works because it helps sync it up well. So, I mean, props to Doug Jones for learning the Spanish lines so that when he's dubbed over, it actually syncs up pretty well. It looks good. So,
and apparently all the mechanics and the face of the thing that he was in, I guess the Fawn and the whatever you call the thing with the eyes.
The pale man.
The pale man.
Official.
It was so loud that he couldn't even hear when to give his line. So,
yeah,
it does help like that. But yeah, some
won
really
best
creatures in there.
It won best. I don't know if they changed the name to it. Here it says best film, not in the English language.
Okay.
But they released two others. Damn it, I can't.
It's a cartoon about rabbits, Jacob. Let's watch that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's bunnies. It's cute cartoon bunnies. But yeah, if you did come in late, Jake, we were talking about that, and I said it's cool that if you have the Criterion of that, you get a little featurette that has Guillermo del Toro himself talking about it, and again, how it was sort of influential for him. So yeah, as I've said, I think he's a guy that I have a lot of taste in common with and would really get along with and like to talk about. Plus, I'm a fan, of course, his work too, and this is a great example. I think this is one of the best movies of that decade, of the 2000s. I definitely put it up there.
Sure.
And it is a movie that sort of beat the odds, like you said. It had things counting against it for like the North American box office, but I did not see it in theaters, which sucks. I don't know why I didn't, because it would have been.
To us horror fans, he was already a name in the genre. So had I not been aware of him, I may not have ever seen this movie.
Mm-hmm. But the movie's basically a success on all levels.
Because
and it's not like one of those movies that has delayed success either. Sorry, go ahead.
And in Spain, I think a lot of people were bringing like young children to see the movie because they thought it was like a fairy tale, but they had to like put big disclaimers like, no, there's horrible graphic violence in this. Like Jacob mentions the bottle smashing scene, which that's pretty graphic.
Yeah,
I mean, that guy's face in.
Fantasy when I saw it. But even like the first time I saw it, even I was shocked by that. I was like, whoa, we're really going for it here.
Yeah. And this guy shoots everybody. I mean, he shoots everybody in the whole movie.
Yeah.
He's like, my baby's about to be born, so I'm going to shoot the doctor because he gave a guy
well, that shows like, yeah. You're really not smart.
Yeah.
But he's like, I like to think too that he didn't just do it like without thinking. I like to think that he's just like, I need the doctor, but I can't not shoot him. Like that's his code. Somebody pisses me off, I have to shoot them. Like, I need the doctor to deliver the baby. What a conundrum. I'll just have to shoot him and hope for the best.
He says go and grab the field medic or something like that when she's actually in labor.
Mm-hmm.
Like go grab some field medic. Yeah.
Now, I mean, I don't think this is a movie where you can pretend the fantastic stuff doesn't happen, but you can watch it in such a way that there's things like that with some give and take that are interesting. Because like one is, it's obvious that his wife, Ophelia's mother, is not in good health, and that especially at that time with the limited resources, having a baby would be very risky to her health. Right? We know that right off the bat, but we also see that like when Ophelia takes the fawn's advice and puts the mandrake under her bed, it does make her stronger and it does help her. Then, the captain finds it and gets rid of it, and Ophelia's mother herself, thinking she's teaching her a lesson about growing up, burns it. And that's right before she's about to give birth. But also at the same time, then you have the whole thing about the doctor too. So you could say like it was just a coincidence. The mandrake didn't do anything. And you could say she only died because the stupid guy killed the only person that maybe could have brought her through alive. So there is, I don't think the right way to watch the movie is to pretend that Ophelia is crazy and imagined everything. I don't think that, but there is, they do put enough in the real world to like almost come up with real world explanations for why certain things happen, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, I kind of like that give and take, that push and pull throughout the movie.
It kind of leaves it up to interpretation at the end, and you don't really know the truth. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it would be the bleakest movie in the world if you don't believe the fantastic stuff, because then it's just this girl was in such a horrible situation that she hallucinated a bunch of shit, which made her do desperate, crazy things, which eventually got her killed. I mean, wow, that's a fun story. So to me, it's a lot better to think that yes, her mortal body died, but she passed on to the realm that she was supposed to be in all along. And you see, her mother there is the same as her mother in the real world.
Right.
So it's like it's the same. So it's not like she's leaving her mother for a different mother.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I was going to ask you that at the end, but I guess we can. Yeah. So you obviously think it was real.
Well, it's funny how sometimes you can talk about like whether it's a book or a movie or whatever, like an unreliable narrator, and that's the thing. This movie has an actual narrator. I've never really heard of a movie that has an actual narrator, and it's implied that that's an unreliable narrator. Like, unless it's like I'm talking about an outside narrator. It's not like, say, watching Fight Club with the unreliable narrator. Because in that case, the narrator is one of the characters in the movie, and he's unreliable, and we find out why. But this is suggesting that there's some outside of the story narrator who's just lying to us. That seems ridiculous to me. I'm not saying that couldn't be done in fiction. I guess there's no hard and fast rule against it, but it seems stupid to me. So I could not. So to me, I take the movie as it's presented to me, that it all really happened. Because otherwise, it's just like, again, so am I supposed to believe that this crazy narrator that's talking to us is, again, a manifestation of Ophelia's mental illness? Like, that seems like a crazy reach. So, yeah, to me, it all definitely really happened. Otherwise, it's just a super movie about a girl who's in a horrible situation, and things are even worse because she hallucinates a bunch of shit that makes her do stuff that ultimately get her killed.
Yeah, she watches her entire family die, and then her brother doesn't die, but who knows what happens to him.
I mean, I can think we're supposed to understand, those people will take good care of him.
I mean, still the time period. I mean, infant death, I'm sure, was extremely high.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great situation considering there are a bunch of rebels living and fighting, a guerrilla war that they're ultimately going to lose in the mountains. But still, it's better than what we saw before. I'd rather have a baby raised in a rebel camp with danger every day than being raised by, that fucking monster.
Doesn't the mother's health improve also when they find the antibiotics? Doesn't he give her some antibiotics that makes her get better? Or he puts something in a drink and makes her drink it, and that seems to work for a little bit.
I mean, the doctor does help her when he can.
Either that or the mandrake.
It's not like the doctor's trying to help. Of course he is. And he has an interesting conversation with the captain when he finds out, that he euthanized the soldier that he was torturing. He's just like, he couldn't comprehend it. Why didn't you obey me? Because he's like, what the price is. And he's like obeying without questioning, that kind of thing. Like, only people like you can do that. And of course, he's just like, well, I have to kill you now.
Yeah, that's exactly. Oh, you disobeyed an order.
Because I feel like
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say sometimes you'll see really evil character in movies, and I mean, obviously you can always find somebody at least that evil in real life and real history. So I mean, the captain's not a real character, but he's set in a real time frame. Yeah, you better believe that people like that existed under Franco's regime. That was the whole fucking point of the system. People like him would rise up in the power because that's the kind of stuff that they valued. Again, to me, as far as I'm concerned, they are fascists. Same thing when you find out about some of like the worst Nazi criminals. The worst Nazi criminals, they weren't low down they weren't privates. They were people with power, and how they got it was by embodying what the Nazis thought was great stuff, which was like ruthlessness and cruelty and things like that. And it's the same thing here. Like this guy, Franco would have thought he was a completely ideal soldier. He was doing everything right. I mean, as we said, that whole, like, not just the brutality of beating a young man to death in front of his father, but remember, he doesn't even talk back to him. All he says is, if my father told you something, he's telling the truth. And that was enough for him to just be like, okay, I'm going to kill you now for your insolence. Like, whoa.
And then kills them both, and then finds the rabbit, realizes that he was wrong.
They were telling
why don't you search these fuckers better next time, Well,
that's the other thing, right? He's just annoyed his time was wasted. He doesn't care about committing 2 brutal and unnecessary murders. It's just about having his time wasted.
Right.
The one thing I have to say that I do wonder about is the watch, because when he's at the dinner party that some of the important people come to, somebody there mentions that they knew his father, who was also a soldier. And he says there was a story about how when he died on the battlefield, he had took out his own watch and smashed it, so as some would know. And the captain's answer is, that's ridiculous. He never had a watch. Do you think he's lying? Because it seems to me he must be lying. Yeah. Like, I think he did get the whole watch idea from his father. To me, it seems like that was something that was instilled in him by his father. He's so obsessed with the father-son relationship, right? He wants to have a son so badly.
Right. Well, at the beginning, it shows him fixing the watch and, repairing it and everything, making it work again. So, yeah.
So it does seem like he's probably lying, but then the question is, why would he feel necessary to tell that lie? Like, what about that story makes him look bad to them? That his father had passed on this idea about having a watch. I don't know. Just like earlier, he does say something kind of similar, although it doesn't hit the same way. In that a woman there asks a direct question. She asks, "How did you two meet?" So the wife tells how they met, and then he's like, I have to apologize for my wife. She thinks these stupid stories are interesting. And she's like, and they're like, oh, of course. I'm like, she answered a direct question. She didn't bring it up out of nowhere. But I mean, again, it's like that's supposed to show his attitude. But I don't know if that's connected to the whole watch thing. Like, he just doesn't like anybody talking about stories about anything. I don't know.
I mean, just like emotion at all, any inkling of emotion at all, is weakness, I guess. So,
yeah, pretty much. You got to give credit too, because like this apparently, had a career in Spain where he had mostly done like lighthearted comedic stuff, to the point that I can't remember where I found it, somewhere in Wikipedia, I think, where like some of the producers were telling Del Toro, look, you're not from here, you're from Mexico, so you don't know this, but you cast the wrong guy. Audiences aren't going to buy this guy as that. But obviously, no worries there. He
does a great job.
Really good, really.
Asshole. Yeah.
Really convincing for once. Let's see here. I think there is a thing on casting. Shit, I had something about the casting. I don't know where it is now. But yeah, there was something like that. So a couple, I think, of the producers or something. It's something like that. They're like, you're from Mexico. You don't know this guy's career and stuff. But it was basically the audience isn't going to buy him in this role. But obviously, they did very much. Very chilling performance. Speaking of the effects, I was most impressed by like that scene where like he's sewing up his own face.
Hey, how did he get cut, by the way? Because I missed that, and I kept trying to rewind it and see what I missed. But
oh, okay. So early on, there's a scene to let us know right off, that Mercedes is helping rebels before she even said. There's a scene where Mercedes is like doing domestic stuff, and she's like cutting vegetables or something. She takes that little knife and hides it. So she has it on her person all the time. So after she gets captured and he ties her to the pole, and he's doing the same speech. He's going over to his torture instruments and blabbing, saying the same stuff said to the soldier about how he'd get everything out of her in time and thing. She takes out the knife and frees herself. So she comes up behind him. She's not very smart, because if she's smart, like, I'm no Navy SEAL. I've never been trained in the deadly arts, but I know if you have a short knife like that, jab him in the neck.
Sure.
But she doesn't. She stabs in the back once, then she stabs in the front once, and then when he falls down, she sticks the blade in his mouth, and that's when she says to him, she says, like, I'm not some old man or some defenseless injured soldier. And she says, you won't be the first pig I butchered or something like that. And then she cuts it through his cheek and runs off.
Okay.
So that's how he got cut. That's why his shirt's all full of blood too, because she stabbed him a couple times first. She gets him pretty good, but I'm still thinking, like, you could have eliminated all of this if you just jammed it into his neck. But anyway.
Okay. So he at that point he knew that she was the mole.
Oh yeah, by the time he was cut, right? Yeah, what gave her away was the thing about was there a couple things, the way she acted and stuff. The Bane thing was the key. When they first got all the supplies for that shed, he says, "I've got the only key, right?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "I'll hold on to it then."
And then he gives the key to Pedro or whoever it is.
Yeah, because then what happens is there's the attack on the train. They're like, "What was the point of the attack?" And they find out it was a diversion, so they get attacked there, and they broke into the thing. In checking, he checks the lock and sees that it wasn't broken. So obviously somebody had to use a key. So that was his main.
I could pick that lock blindfolded. Like those locks are so easy to pick. Those old locks like that with the skeleton keys,
big,
ridiculous,
big clumsy thing. Yeah. But anyway, that was his main evidence against her, knowing that she had been working with the rebels. So then, they capture her and tie her to the thing, and he's going to torture her, but she has the knife that she'd hidden earlier. She frees herself with it, stabs him a couple times, and sticks the blade in his mouth and gives him across his cheek. So that's how he got that wound.
You knew the knife was going to come back. They kept showing it, so you knew it was going to appear again. Mm-hmm. She kept cutting vegetables and then folding it up in her apron, so you knew it was going to make an appearance. Chekhov's gun.
She's a gutsy character. I mean, just like whenever I see movies like this, or like about people like resisting the Nazis and stuff like that, I mean, it really is something. I get it. Like, I didn't live then. I don't know what I would have done. Because there's a part where after the doctor goes out and meets a group of the rebels, and he's just like, this isn't a fight you guys can win. What you should be doing is crossing the border and getting the hell out of here.
Right.
And he says, I can't do that. I mean, I just have to respect that, because I have to think if I was in that situation, probably I would be crossing the border. I'd be like, I can't live under this, I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't go along with the fascists. I wouldn't just do whatever the fascists told me to do. I would try to get away. But I mean, you got to give credit to people that have the option to maybe get away, but they're like, no, I'm going to stay here and fight, even if the odds are against us. I mean, again, spoilers, it doesn't take place in the movie, but these people do not win. Only the youngest of them lived to see Franco go down. What Franco did was he passed it on after he passed authority on to a king, and then the king basically began the process of making Spain democratic. But yeah, Spain has, I mean, most of those European countries have long, weird histories as far as, the power, but Spain's is bonkers, man. Like if you don't know history back far enough, you would be surprised to find out there was a time, like for several hundred years, like not a short time, where Spain was one of the absolute powers of the world. Mm-hmm. They were a super powerful country that was feared and threw their weight around. But then they had a really long decline. Like the 1588, the Spanish Armada defeat to the British Navy was sort of the beginning of a very long decline. Like they didn't become weak right after that, but it was kind of the beginning of the end that went on for decades and decades. So that by the time you got into, say, once, I don't know, I want to say maybe the 18th century or so, they were really starting to become like a third-rate power compared to a lot of some of the other European nations. But yeah, there was a time where, and again, you've got a long thing, you've got a monarchy, and then you've got several revolutions and things, and there's the transfer of powers. In a country, any country that's old enough, you're going to see all sorts of changes. But Spain's is really interesting. I'm gonna start looking stuff up here on the fly, but I did read a bit. In the days coming up to this, I was just doing a bit of independent reading about it. And there's some stuff I already kind of knew generally, but some of the stuff I didn't know. It's pretty interesting. But yeah. I would like to find out exactly what the clear reasons are for Spain's neutrality during World War II, because it feels like the stage was set for them to like play at least some role in it, and somehow they managed to stay out of it. So I'll have to look into that more thoroughly. just for my own satisfaction.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
But it's funny, we're talking so much about the real world, and I know that's on me. It's really on me. But I mean, obviously, the movie is more fantasy than that, so we should talk more about the fantasy elements and stuff because I love it. I love how everything looks. You know, they're off somewhere in the Spanish countryside. They're on the edge of a forest near some mountains, and there's an old. You know, they don't even know what the origin of the labyrinth is. They're just like it's just this pile of rocks that's always been here. The forest, I don't know. I've always been a fan of. It's hard to define. As I said when I was talking about like genres of fantasy, I really do like this sort of because it's the closest to sort of like what classic mythology was like, which almost led up almost to like the end of the 19th century when finally like superstitions were starting to die out around the world and most people were starting to believe stuff like that wasn't real. Like for most of human existence there was this idea that like not only were like gods and monsters and demons and things very real, but also that they were here with us. They weren't in like some remote place like Olympus or heaven. Like they might have believed that too, but they did believe that there is some sort of otherworldly thing in our world and that sometimes like we can just cross over to it. The earliest examples, this is like the earliest civilizations, right? Like once you had humans finally not being hunter-gatherers and living in actual civilizations, there was always that idea like once I step outside here, I'm in the natural world and anything goes. It's like there's the forest. Go far enough into the forest and suddenly you're not in like the normal world anymore, Well, and that's something that's in Hellboy a lot. That's what Hellboy is like. So obviously, again, I think that's a big influence on Del Toro being friends with Mignola.
Sure.
And that's what I like here too. Is the idea that like, yeah, you don't have to go very far to cross over from like the world, the everyday world, the rational, normal world of humans into some sort of fantasy world of darkness and danger. The idea that they're kind of rubbing up against each other.
Well, we've answered a lot of those questions with science, right? Because I mean, can you imagine like 500 years ago when there's an eclipse? It's like, oh shit, God's coming to kill us all, or whatever you believe in. It's coming to.
That's in the movie we did, right?
Up. Yeah, I mean,
that's in Apocalypto, right?
Right.
It's like that pivotal moment in Apocalypto where like they think they're going to be like sacrificed, and suddenly by coincidence it happens to be a solar eclipse, and everyone's like losing. It's like, oh my god, the gods disapprove.
Yeah. But I mean, it's something that, now we know what causes that and we know what makes the rain. We know what, it's, we've kind of, predicted all of these, superstitions and, maggots don't, miraculously appear on meat. We've learned, that
spontaneous generation.
That wasn't that long ago. You think about,
some of this stuff was only, some of the stuff wasn't, like I said, like, it was only really just coming into the start of the 20th century that people were. And again, I'm not going to be the super cynical person and point out all the religious people. I'm going to leave that alone. Believe what they want. But I'll just say, like, even like most religious people, they still have a very secular, rational view about most things. I'm not going to jump on them about everything. Like, for instance, even if like somebody downtown starts yelling about like being Jesus, like even somebody that's like really believes in all that, it's like, no, he's just mentally ill. Most people think that.
My mom did her internship. She was a nurse or her whatever. She had to work at a psychiatric hospital, and there were different wings, right? And they on each wing they had a guy that thought they were both Jesus. So they had to keep them on separate wings because they would fight to the death if they ever saw each other because they both thought they were Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's a fun story.
See, I mean, mental health, mental problems and what's the word I'm trying to look for? Things like that. I mean, they're always going to be around, but like religion doesn't help those things. That's all I'm going to say. Religion just makes it worse.
Just think of how many things cause hallucinations in humans. Fever, all sorts of things you eat. Bug bites. All kinds of things that could explain
demonic.
A lot
and people are just like demonic possession.
Exactly.
Demonic possession.
Well, I just got bit by a fucking tick or something. And oh no, you're obviously got the devil in you, boy.
I think I brought this detail up before talking about something else because it's one I really enjoy. Is like that. Again, speaking of like the ancient world and stuff, and like just how much that was a part of the everyday. one of the things, of course, one of the reasons why we know a lot about ancient Rome is that they wrote a lot of their shit down, right? Like not just the great scribes, but they did like everyday chronicling and cataloging of things, just to help, because they had a big fucking empire to run, right? So they had a lot of stuff they were writing down. And there have been like reports found that were made by various like Roman, I don't know, we call them legions or whatever, but, groups of soldiers, right? So obviously Rome has this has a huge army and has many soldiers in places, and they're not always fighting wars, but they're still off on exercises doing things. And there's been many, many extremely boring by the numbers reports that have been, turned up by archaeologists and people over the years. And it's just basically stuff like just talking about like what that group of soldiers was like doing. Like, they had like, they're up in Gaul or something, right? They're up in Gaul and they're on maneuvers or something like that. And it's all very boring, dry stuff about, how many miles they traveled that day or where they stopped to eat and exercises they did, or maybe like if they like encountered any locals and stuff like that. But sometimes right in the middle of all that, you'll read something like had to cross to this part and met the river, attempted to cross the river, but were repelled by the river god. So had to go up another 6 or 7 miles to avoid him. You're just like, wait a second, what? So sometimes they would actually talk about having encounters with gods or supernatural beings, like as a matter of fact, like it was just something that happened. It's like right there in the report. It's so weird. You just go through all these lines of boring stuff text, and then somewhere it's like, oh, we tried to cross, but the river god fought us and we couldn't beat him, so we had to leave him alone and go downstream to a part where the river was calmer and cross it. It's like, okay, good report. Like there's multiple examples of things like that in old Roman records, because that to them it was just like an everyday occurrence. You might just,
the gods aren't gonna let us cross right here.
Yeah, you just might run into something like that and have to deal with it. That was just an everyday part. So I think another thing that comes to this being, set in the 20th century when things are more rational, and they mentioned the whole thing about like the idea is she's supposed to be in that other realm, but she's trapped in the mortal realm, and they've been looking for her for like thousands of years or something. And the idea is that he put all these portals up, and he's like, this is the last one. That idea, again, that you can trace back to something like Tolkien too, because even though that's its own world, one of the things that's going on in Tolkien in the background in, the Legendarium and Lord of the Rings is that's fading from the world. It's most notable in Tolkien by the retreat of the elves, right? The elves are slowly, over a period of time, they're leaving Middle Earth. They're going off to the heavenly lands, whatever you want to call them, stuff like that. In this, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, it's kind of like as mankind has industrialized and got more technology and scientific, and just as we spread across, it's, we pushed the mythological, we pushed the supernatural to the fringes, so it's starting to disappear. And that's kind of what's going on here. It's like, this is the very last, like all the other portals are gone, this is the last portal, this is your last shot to go home or whatever. So that's pretty cool too.
So I just got confirmation from Jess, Field of Dreams was filmed in Iowa. I'm
glad it was authentic then. If you're going to blather on about how great and pure Iowa is, you might as well actually shoot it there. It'd be kind of insulting to like shoot in another state. Like, Iowa's
filmed in Ontario.
We can't get any good Iowa shots. It looks better in Ontario, like you say.
Filmed in Montreal, which they could probably pull that off, honestly.
Well, it's like when we did Heaven's Gate, which is supposed to be all about how beautiful Wyoming is, and like a lot of it's shot in Alberta. Anyway.
You can't really tell unless you're a fucking botanist, I guess. You're like, oh, those don't grow there, stuff like that.
Wrong time of year for that, Yeah, I get it.
We don't have those types of conifers.
But so she's given 3 tasks by the fawn, because the idea, just for people, like the setup is like once she finds the fawn and the fairy leads her there, the idea coming back from the narration is that like she actually isn't a mortal girl, that she's the spirit of some princess from like that fairy realm or whatever that got trapped in the mortal world. The idea is she needs to be led back, and in order to get there, she has to complete these tasks to make sure she hasn't become immortal. So what's the first task? It's like go under this tree that's dying,
3 rocks
down underground, and there's a giant toad there that's killing the tree. You need to get it to swallow these rocks so you can get a key. And it shows the type of person Ophelia is right off, because there's a lot of little girls that just wouldn't do that, even if they believed it. I mean, she has to believe.
I don't know that I would do that.
You know, and that's one of the things I like. That's one of the kind of, again, it's the kind of protagonist I like a lot, and I think you can do it with a boy. I kind of prefer it with a girl.
Sure.
That's how I've written my own stuff. And again, maybe it just comes back to some of the classics girls, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, are probably the 2 big ones, but there's other ones too. But I've not to bring up my own writing, but at least once or twice I know on the show, I brought up one of the only things I've actually fucking finished. So maybe someday it'll get published. I wrote in 2010 a novella called The Dark Staircase. And The Dark Staircase has 3 main inspirations, and 2 of them are connected to this, and because one of them is this. So one of them is one of the Narnia books. I think I have it. The Silver Chair. And the main thing in there in the Silver Chair is that in my story, it's about a girl who's visiting relatives in Ireland, and then she discovers like a hidden magic underground kingdom. The Silver Chair is kind of that. It's like there's like it's instead of Narnia, it's a different world, and there's like an underground kingdom. The other thing is a very short Hellboy story. It's only a few pages long, a Christmas Hellboy story about a girl, again, that goes to like an underground place and meets like ghosts. And then the third thing is this movie, which I connect to Hellboy. So those are sort of the 3 main things for one of the only things I ever actually fucking finished. And one of the things is about the idea of being led somewhere by fairies. In mine, the fairies just like fairies. In this, the fairies start out as those insects and then change into the fairy, which again, I think is a cool idea. It's again that idea of her seeing something from the real world that anybody says, oh, there's one of those stick insects, but then it like transforms and helps her cross over into the supernatural world. But anyway, in that story that I wrote, and I've been trying to write a sequel for like 15 years that I keep like fucking up and abandoning and stuff. But anyway, it's just because it's supposed to have the same character. It was always important to me. I always knew, even before, like the main character was going to be a girl. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't work with a boy. I've just always kind of liked that tradition of a girl. Mm-hmm. Speaking of like Pan's Labyrinth, like the movie Labyrinth, the one with Jim Henson, that's a girl. We already mentioned her. Jennifer Connelly plays the character in that.
Jennifer Connelly.
Like Labyrinth would not be the same movie if it was a boy. It just wouldn't.
Pre-breast reduction.
Yeah, but that would have been pre-breast maturity too, right?
Yeah, we're close. We're getting there.
Labyrinth. I mean, she's 13, I think, in Labyrinth. But anyway.
Damn shame. That doctor should be thrown in prison forever.
Just like, just like one of Neil Gaiman's best known stories, because they made a movie about it. The movie's good, but I mean, is Coraline, which again could have been about a boy, but it's about a girl. So I'm not saying you can't have stories where the main character in a fantasy thing is a boy. Of course you can. I've just always preferred the girl route. I think they're better suited to it, at least for me. But of course, there's exceptions.
Yeah, I love that movie. So, I need to read more Gaiman. I haven't read a lot of his stuff. Yeah,
I'm kind of weird about it in that, like, as I own several of his novels and I like them, but I do firmly believe his comic stuff is better. But really? Gaiman has like millions of fans that have never even read his comics because they just love his books. And of course, there are many people that have read both, obviously. But I mean, he has a lot of people that they're like, I'll get to the comics eventually, but the books are what I'm here for. So I mean, I don't think his books are overrated or anything like that, but. Yeah, I mean, he's just one of those obscenely good writers. What can you say about Neil Gaiman? And as far as like what he's done, like the kind of things he's done, like if I could just steal someone's career, he's who I'd steal. Not Stephen King, not this person. Yeah, it would be Neil Gaiman's. I would love to have, been responsible for writing like a revolutionary comic, which he started when he was fucking 26, for God's sakes. That's how old he was when he started Sandman. To have such an impact on the comic world and the novel world, and to be I mean, as I said.
Yeah.
If I could just like steal somebody's accomplishments and make them my own, it would be Neil Gaiman.
That's impressive.
He's so good. Yeah, great writer.
Saw a picture of Ben Affleck and his daughters. I don't remember what it was even talking about, but the older one had a book by Gaiman. She was like talking to Affleck. I don't know about the book. I don't know, but
right. So most of his books are actually for adults. Coraline's not. Coraline. Well, I mean, obviously you can enjoy it, but I mean, Coraline like is one of those. And I might as well tie this into this too. I was eventually going to anyway, but you know, another thing I always like dark children's books. You know, they technically they're for children, but they have some edge. They have some darkness to them. They are scary. That's totally what Coraline is. And there's a whole group of people that just don't like that. They think that should be kept away from kids, or it bothered them when they were kids, so they think it's bad. I mean, I can't, I don't know. I don't want to call them pussies, but I mean, come on. That's what was fun.
We're used to the Disney, you know, adaptations of the Grimm fairy tales, you know,
right. So that's another thing, right? Like you saying that is that's changed our perception of what fairy tale means.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a line in this movie. It's very sad where, you know, I think it's after the mandrake, and then like, you know, her mother's worried the captain's going to do something to her. Says, please just let me talk to her, you know, alone. And so she takes the mandrake and throws it into the fire, and she says to her, shit, I had it. You're getting older, and you'll see that life isn't like your fairy tales. The world is a cruel place, and you'll learn that, even if it hurts. And, I mean, poignant line and all that stuff. But it also seems to suggest, it almost feels like a more modern line, really, because we live in a world where for decades fairy tales have been used through that lens. But as you said, if you go back and look at these original fairy tales, they weren't all happy and nice. They were dark and gruesome. They didn't always have... It's funny now, we'll use fairy tale to almost suggest fairy tale means always has a happy ending. Plenty of fairy tales did not have happy endings, or they had what you might call earn your happy ending, where it's like, maybe in the end it's happy, but a lot of bad shit happened to get there. Yeah. You know,
we had to eat grandma. You know?
Right. So I mean that's absolutely something. Like I don't blame Disney, and I don't mind the Disney fairy tales. They're fun and they're cool, and I like them, and they shaped me a little bit. But they are a sanitized, watered down version of what fairy tales originally were. And it's hilarious to, I guess, our more sensitive society to think about like kids from like 200 years ago going to bed and having their mother or whoever read them a fairy tale that's actually fucking terrifying. And that's the way to get them to go to sleep. Now go to sleep or the goblins will come and bite your head off, you know. Like terrifying children, like nowadays we think of terrifying children as like, you know, a bad thing to do, maybe even abusive. But for a long time, it was just like, that's part of raising kids. You got to scare the shit out of them. And I mean, I'm somewhere in between. I don't think it's right to traumatize children, but I also don't think if your kid watches Return to Oz, it's going to traumatize them. I'm tired of people whining about that. So I was going to bring up Return to Oz again as maybe my childhood example. Now, Return to Oz is not this. Return to Oz doesn't have F words. Return to Oz doesn't have real life World War II era fascism and people being beaten to death. But Return to Oz is darker and scarier, more serious than I think a lot of people were prepared for when they saw that movie. It has always remained one of my favorites. And I have to say, the scene in this movie, which I think is probably one of the most striking and memorable scenes of the 2000s for sure, is the dinner hall scene, the second task, where she has to draw the chalk door to go, you know, get that thing, get that key or get that, what is it? It's like a dagger or something, right? The Pale Man scene, right? That scene is crazy good, isn't it? Like that whole, it's terrifying. You come to this like long hallway and you come out and it's like a dinner hall with a sumptuous feast on the table, and the Pale Man is sitting there with his eyes down in front of him and he's motionless, and it's terrifying. And of course she fucks up. She's not supposed to eat anything, but she can't help herself. She eats a grape and it wakes him up, and he comes like that scene. I have to imagine for certain people of a certain age probably saw it when they were too young. You know, I was an adult by the time I saw it, but there was probably a whole generation of people who saw it when they shouldn't have, you know, and it's like much worse than Return to Oz. But it always reminds me of my defining scene in my childhood on that side. Again, I don't think Pan's Labyrinth is appropriate for children. I'm just saying some children might wind up with it. Is in Return to Oz, where Dorothy, after being imprisoned by Mombi, who in this version of the story switches heads all the time, right? She manages to break out of the tower room where she's been locked, sneaks down to where Mombi's sleeping so she can steal the key from her. And that whole hallway is full of the heads, right? It's a terrifying scene because she doesn't wake Mombi up at first, but the heads wake up and they all start screaming and she's running. And then, of course, Mombi's headless body starts coming after her. Like, oh my God, that's that scene for me. But for some people, like it's this Pan's Labyrinth dinner hall scene with the Pale Man. I mean, obviously, the Pale, it's much scarier. But again, it's different because Pan's Labyrinth never was for children to begin with. But I don't know. It's just an amazing scene. And the Pale Man reminds me of things I've seen in like Resident Evil 4, maybe. Something like that. Which came out a couple years, 2004. What's crazy too is this movie has a mandrake, right? Like that's what she puts under the bed. That's the thing she puts under the bed. It's weird to think that like in 2006, that wasn't the first time I saw a mandrake on screen in a movie. And in fact, it hadn't even been that long since the last time I saw one, because in the second Harry Potter movie, there are mandrakes, Chamber of Secrets, which I think is a 2002 movie. So I think in the span of 4 years, we had 2 different movies showing mandrakes, which is pretty funny. They play a pretty important role in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, because in that movie, people are getting petrified, which is like, they're not necessarily turned to stone, but like they're frozen because they're getting indirectly looked at by a basilisk. The idea of like a basilisk sees you and you look directly at it, it'll kill you. But in the Harry Potter book, then in the movie, like there's always these reasons why they didn't see it directly. Hermione uses a mirror. There's a reflection of a puddle. Somebody sees it through a ghost. But anyway, the idea in that was the mandrakes have the ability to fix those people, and that's like a little subplot going on in that. But yeah, but I mean, at least people, if there were people who were like little kid, like fairly young children that saw Pan's Labyrinth when they were young children, and then said like, you know, I saw that scene, it scared the hell out of me, and like, oh, it traumatized me. That's fine, because like the movie was not meant for kids. But I do kind of feel like if you saw Return to Oz like I did when you were a kid, and again, it scared me and stayed with me, but it doesn't make me not like the movie. It makes me love the movie. And I'm just thinking, you know, that movie didn't have anything like, I mean, again, when the Pale Man wakes up, he's not just an idle threat. He doesn't get her. He eats 2 of the goddamn fairies. He bites their fucking heads off, right? It's like it's not just an implied threat. We see what he does. It's awful. And again, even when she comes into the room and she sees him, obviously anybody, it wouldn't matter who you are or what age you were, if you saw that thing sitting at the table, you would know it's bad news. But to help you out a little bit, on the walls are pictures of him murdering children. Yeah. It's like, this is what he does. And then in the corner, the pile of the children's shoes, right? Oh, yeah. That scene, yeah. To me, that's one of the best scenes, one of the most memorable, visceral, amazing scenes of the 2000s. It's great. I mean, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think about this movie, I'd have to say.
One big complaint about that scene is people thought that it was too stupid for her to eat the grapes, which, I mean, she is a child. I mean, you know, grapes are good.
It does seem pretty stupid, because you would think maybe grab them and then get through. If you're just taking grapes, grab them, and if nothing happens, it seems to only happen if she eats it. So maybe just take the grape with you. That way you can eat it when you're through the door.
They specifically said don't eat anything while you're there.
Yeah, they said that's what he said. He said you're going to see
something. That is stupid.
He does tell her. He says you're going to see it. Yeah, because I guess that's why, right? Because he does specifically tell her. He says you're going to see like a sumptuous banquet. Touch nothing. So it is pretty stupid. But I don't know. Like I said, she's again, and also you have to remember the condition she's living under. Even though she's, you know, the captain's wife's kid, like they're all, you know, living in rations and things like that. So she's not getting great food. So. Plus, she had been punished, and I don't know how much later this is. I can't, even though I just watched the movie, I can't remember how much time it passed. But remember, when she came back from the first task, she, of course, had ruined her dress and gotten everything muddy. So to, like, punish her, her mother made her go to bed without supper. Right. So you can think that could play into
it. She actually was really hungry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. It is kind of stupid. I feel like you could have done a bit of writing to make maybe her like accidentally touch something or something, but again, I don't mind too much. I don't mind too much. But yeah, maybe if you want to nitpick, you maybe could have written something where she accidentally touches something, like something she slips on something or something catches, could have done it like that. But I mean, because I mean, horrible consequences. She almost gets killed and gets 2 of the fairies' heads bitten off. The 3rd one survives, and that's the one that narcs on her. And that's why the fawn gets madder and wasn't even going to give her the third task. It shows there are real consequences. He says you broke the rules, and you're not getting a chance now. But then he does come back and feel sorry for her and give her a chance for the last task, which turns out to be a test. Saying you don't need to sacrifice the boy, just give him a little blood. She's not even willing to do that. And it's interesting too, because again, what would have happened if the captain wasn't there? Because after the captain shoots and kills her, she bleeds out and her blood falls through. Then they say, oh, you offered up your own blood instead of that as an innocent, so you passed the test. Does that mean the test wouldn't have worked if the captain wasn't there to kill her? I don't know. Like stuff like that, you can go back and forth all day on.
Yeah, because she has to die to get there, right?
I guess that's what's supposed to be implied all along. Maybe that's a way of getting, like you said, that he would never say you have to die to get there, because that would scare the shit out of the kid. But you can manipulate events so it winds up with her dying. There's different ways, I guess, to.
I mean, that's the opening of the film is, the blood going back into her.
The film opens showing that she's already down. So I mean, so anybody watching this film, like who just fires it on, if you watch like the first minute and you see that, you're like, oh, it's not for kids because there's a dead child bleeding out.
Right. A dead coming to life child.
And again, I just appreciate, like, look at this fawn. He's not friendly or happy looking. He's not a Disney fawn.
That looks like a nightmare. And it actually did come from his nightmares, Del Toro's nightmares. That's where the design came from.
Nice. And I mean, it also shows like why she's skeptical. Like she doesn't just immediately agree. Like she knows she's in a bad situation, and the idea that she has like this supernatural out, that you're actually a princess in a fantasy, a fairy realm, you can go there. She does say to him, like, why should I believe anything you say is true? Because we've also seen stories where something like this happens, and all you find out is like you were tricked. You did all this, and you know what you've done? You've opened up the gate to hell, and now the demons can come through. Yeah. They played you, stuff like that, right? So she's not super. I mean, for her age, she's not super. She's not exactly gullible.
I mean, wouldn't a realistic response to when you see the fawn is to fucking run? Like, I mean, I would be terrified if I saw that thing, especially if I was a kid.
I guess when you think about it
right now,
how she got there, though.
Yeah.
Because first she sees the stick turn into the fairy, then she gets led down. I think I would definitely be scared, but I would be open enough, I think, to hold my ground. And again, I think some of that comes from being a girl. I don't want to make absolute, statements about girls and boys because everybody's different. But again, that's why I think that works better with girls. I always feel like the girls are better in these fantasy stories than the boys because I feel like the girls are less cynical. I feel like they're more willing to believe. And I know you could say, no, boys too. And I get it. It's like, even not in a fantasy, it's like, I don't know, fucking Elliot meeting E.T., right? It worked better for Elliot to be a boy because you think a girl would be afraid of ET. So I don't know. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. And I get it. There are boys that can be just as whimsical and open as girls. There are girls that can be closed off. And there are boys that can be brave. There are girls that can be brave. There are boys that can be cowardly girls. So I'm not trying to make any absolute statements here. I'm just saying for some of these stories, I've always felt like it worked better with a girl. And maybe that's just something I've convinced myself of. I don't know.
And I think Jacob makes a great point here with the duality of the creature.
Yeah, and then again, that's something that really separates this from other sort of just like a normal fantasy story. Something that brings it kind of into the real world, right? We've got real world stuff brushing up against and overlapping with the fantasy. And unlike, say, a pure fantasy story where often a character is fairly one-dimensional, this is different. Yeah, so you do have duality. So
Pan is I forget the terminology, but half goat, half man. Not a minotaur, but whatever goat equivalent of that would be.
He calls himself a fawn. You could call him a satyr. You know that term, a satyr? Satyr. Okay, well, yeah. So yeah, a fawn is almost another word for satyr. Like if you watch They've been around. They're part of like Greek mythology. They pop up all over the place in Greek mythology. But yeah, he'd be based on a satyr. Of course, his top is much less human. Think of a satyr as sort of like the goat equivalent of a minotaur, except they're yeah, that's good. See, they're like usually they're much more like traditionally they're more human. See there, that looks like Krampus or something.
Yeah, Krampus, exactly.
But yeah, but faun is another term for satyr. But like I'm gonna think
I'm gonna turn the safe search off. See what we can get here.
Oh Lord. I'm sure it's on something. Ah, crap. A Midsummer Night's Dream has like a faun.
Okay. Yeah.
The Shakespeare thing. Like, well, because that's about like pucks and yeah, that's what Pan is. Like what Jake said. Like Pan's a god, like some sort of nature god.
Yeah, god of nature, god of something like that. The forest.
Yeah, it usually has some again goats and stuff like that. Again, this goes back to ancient Greece. You've got satyrs, you've got nymphs, that kind of stuff. These supernatural creatures of nature. Again, the type of thing that the ancient Greeks expected they might actually encounter if they go deep enough into the woods. They might actually see them. The only other thing about Pan that, like, maybe if people really dig into it, is that Pan does have, like, some sort of connection to, like, sexual desire, which is kind of funny, but that's not part of this. In this, I mean, the Spanish title of this movie is not Pan's Labyrinth. It doesn't actually use the proper name Pan. That was brought in for the English translation.
I mean, Faun's Labyrinth would have worked just as fine. I think.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is in Spain.
It's something faun. Yeah, I don't know the.
El Labyrinto del Fauno. So yeah, so either the labyrinth of the faun or the faun's labyrinth. But they made Pan. I think they just thought it sounded. Pan is actually specifically mentioned, and the whole point of this is while he calls himself a faun, the fantasy world we're seeing here is not supposed to specifically be one that we've heard of. It's based. It has influences, but like it's not like I am the Greek, god Pan. It's not that.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes its inspiration from many different things, including Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology. But yeah, it's too bad the actress who plays Ophelia, I guess she didn't really stick with it. She did a couple other things over the years, but not much. So I don't think she really stayed in acting, which is what happens with a lot of these people that have roles with kids. They aren't always they don't always stay with acting. They might go on to do different things.
I remember looking her up in the past. Yeah, I don't think she did a whole lot past this movie. That'd be 2 or 3 other projects.
Yeah. I mean, it's lucky that he already had a working relationship with Doug Jones, right? To have Doug Jones in his back pocket like that, because he'd already had him for Mimic, and he, of course, used him for Hellboy. It's like I've got characters for you, Doug. Only you can do it.
Exactly. That was probably the reason why he went forward with the story. Because apparently, like he had this thing halfway written and like left it in a cab. Somewhere, and then the cab driver actually realized how important it was and tracked him down and gave it back to him. So he saw that as a sign of needing to finish the project.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he wrote it.
There it is. Yeah, that's right. At one point during production, he left a notebook in a taxi in London and was distraught, but the cabbie returned it to him 2 days later. Yeah, there you go. That's pretty cool. It's interesting too that some of the inspiration came from lucid dreaming, which is something we talked about when we did Waking Life, which is funny because that's the last of our videos that I was kind of rewatching a bit. I was watching some of our Waking Life video a few days ago, which of course talks about that. So it's kind of funny. But this is also seen as sort of a spiritual successor or like brother film or whatever to The Devil's Backbone.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be cool to do that at some point.
I would like to do Devil's Backbone. I would like to do Chronos for sure. I can't believe we haven't done these already. Those are on the forefront of my brain.
Yeah. I really need to see Chronos again. It's been so many years. Or once again, it's funny. It's interesting the kind of international career that Hellboy himself. Again, there's your Hellboy connection. Ron Perlman, right? Ron Perlman's in Chronos.
Yeah, he's
speaking Spanish
for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
That damn Perlman, he speaks a lot of languages.
Yeah, not exactly, but yeah, just like because we did another crazy fantasy film ages ago, The City of Lost Children, which Ron Perlman, which is a French language movie, which Ron Perlman does technically speak French in, but he has barely any lines. He barely says anything, so it's pretty easy.
And he's in Alien Resurrection as well.
Same director.
Junot.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Junot, I think it's this. So yeah, so again, you have to think like having already been familiar with him when there was this idea of making a live action Hellboy, that Del Toro had him in mind, and he is very good. I like those two movies, especially the second one. I own the second one, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. It's a really great movie to watch. It's one of the last movies with like really prevalent practical effects. Came out in 2007. Obviously, there is some CG in there, but it uses a lot of practical effects, and it looks really good. It's a really cool movie. But forget what I was going to say. It was something about Hellboy. I don't know. Yeah, I just say I recommend that movie a lot. It's a good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah, we'll see what. Then they made the new Hellboy movie that I couldn't even get through. I was so bored by it. Was I think David Harbour in the role. He was on Stranger Things. Anyway, I only watched 35 minutes. Oh yeah, that sucked. But now they're going to do another one based on The Crooked Man, and I love The Crooked Man, but it doesn't seem like that's ideal for a movie. The Crooked Man is just sort of low stakes for a movie. I mean, in a way, like we talked about this before, we don't always need like the Marvel level movie where it's like, oh, the whole world's at stake or the multiverse, right? I don't mind a lower stakes thing. I'm just surprised they would pick The Crooked Man because The Crooked Man.
I've wanted Crooked Man since that movie came out. Conjuring 2? Like I thought that was a much better choice to go with than not Abigail, but Annabelle or whatever the hell it is.
Oh no, this is the Hellboy story called The Crooked Man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a Hellboy story called The Crooked Man, which apparently is going to be the next Hellboy movie. With I don't know who the hell's supposed to be in the role, like a complete reboot again. And again, that's one of my favorite Hellboy stories. I like it a lot. It just seems like an odd choice for a movie because it's kind of low key. But I mean, that could be really good. It's like basically, how Hellboy is always in different parts of the world doing different sort of mythology. This one's actually a rare American one. Most of them don't take place in the U.S., of course, because it's based on like Appalachian stuff. That kind of folklore.
Right.
It's really good though.
It could be interesting.
But yeah, I was saying that earlier, Jake, that Crimson Peak, I think a lot of people, it wasn't what they wanted and they didn't like it, but I like it. I think I am going to go back and buy it. Like a week or so ago, I had the chance to buy, I think it was the Arrow edition. It was really nice. And I was like, it's still a lot of money though. But now I kind of think that I will get it. I really do like it.
All these releases are so expensive these days.
I know.
I saw so many really cool Criterions that I wanted, but they were like $40 each, not for just a Blu-ray.
Yeah. Same here. I mean, it works out to the same thing. Like the minimum price of like a Criterion Blu-ray Canadian is like $50.99. Unless you're getting some sort of sale or deal or something, which I try to get as much as I can. But
do you guys have the Criterion sale there? I know Criterion does a lot of sales sometimes.
No. What would happen is like all I could do is the Criterion sale, as far as I know, only works directly through their site, and it's not worth getting because you actually
Shipping.
not just shipping, you actually have to pay like the duty stuff. I did it once by accident. Now I realize the only way for me to buy Criterion online is through like Amazon or something. If I buy it from Criterion, they will stop it at the border and ask for more money.
Is it
I had to
like
do that once.
like a VAT, like a value added tax type thing?
Just something about the
Or
duty
more duty.
duty fees, which I was
It's
like, this is
not
bizarre.
duty
I've never heard of
free.
like I've ordered plenty of I've ordered plenty of things from the US over the years, but for some reason that's the way it works with Criterion. Like, so as a Canadian, it's completely useless for me to order directly from their site. I learned that the hard way. So even if like they slash the price right down, there's of course the disparity between Canadian and American dollars, and then there's that plus shipping. So it doesn't work out to help me at all. And I'll say like the next big thing I want is I want the Wong Kar-wai box set. Because and maybe when the library gets up and running again, I can get we did one of the Wong Kar-wai's movies about a year ago. We did Chungking Express, which I love, but I really want to do the earlier one, As Tears Go By, and I've already taken it out from the library before and watched it, so I'd like to take it out again, and we can do an episode on that if you're able to watch it, because it's a really cool movie. Love Wong Kar-wai, but the Wong Kar-wai box set I think has 7 movies, and I have it on my Amazon wish list right now, and it's kind of crazy to watch because the price just keeps bouncing all over the place. Like I've seen it as low as like 155 and as high as like 206, so it's interesting like how I'm kind of watching to see how low it might get, and then maybe I can pounce on it. I don't know, because I want it very badly.
Well, that's been a big part of the problem with so much time between episodes for us guys. We're things that both of us have access to, or it's all the streaming services are different, and
I know it's crazy. Like you had brought up Election, which I was totally down to do, because I can remember for years like looking around on like Prime and stuff, and Election would just keep popping up. I'd have to go buy it to look, like it would pop up on and now like you mentioned it, and now it's gone. It's like it's been scrubbed from existence. Like it never fucking existed.
It was the same for a movie you had recommended that you wanted to do that you had access to, and I was like, I know I saw that thing on like 3 different platforms, and
now just completely gone.
It's just everything's so boutique now with what.
And I mean, and again, here's another thing that makes it hard for me for Criterion is a lot of people will point out, well, much cheaper than even buying one Criterion movie is like get the Criterion channel. Not available in Canada. Trust me, I would if I could. Oh, Jay, I think it's a good idea because I think, not as opposed to, but more than most comic book writers, Brubaker's stuff is very, I think, adaptable for TV and movies. It's, I don't think he's writing thinking about that. I just think that's how it works. Plus, a lot of Brubaker's stuff is, like you say, crime stuff. It's like spy stuff. Like I've written, he's written stuff like X-Men. I mean, the X-Men stuff he did is actually some of the space opera X-Men. He's got Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, which I have, which is good. But I mean, his real bread and butter, right, is like those crime stuff, like Criminal, like Batman, like GCPD, things like that. I always get Criminal mixed up with 100 Bullets. I know they're different, but I mix them up. But it seems like a pretty good idea because, I mean, you think about some of the things that get adapted, it's like, they have to change so much, and I don't think they would have to do that much. I think Brubaker is one of the most ideal guys. Plus, he has some experience working in TV. He's written some scripts and stuff like that. I was going to say, on that thing, did you see the new Batman animated show, the one that's like set in the 40s? Because Brubaker's like a producer on that. It really won me over. I thought the first episode was very meh, but then I kept watching and it kept getting better. Plus, I really do like Golden Age Batman, so it's a cool like mixtape. It's kind of like Golden Age Batman. It's also taking some of his Rogues Gallery that came later and then remixing them as Golden Age. It's pretty cool. So I liked it quite a bit. But Brubaker is one of the producers on that. I don't know if he wrote any episodes, but he's part of it.
What is that streaming on?
That's on Prime for me.
Okay.
It should be for you too. It's a Prime original, so it should be on there. And I'm pretty sure because Eric watched it. I don't know if Eric didn't like the first episode either, and I said it gets better. I don't know if he kept watching. He should have, because I think it gets better.
I'll check that out. I love Batman.
Yeah, no, it's cool because like the first episode was kind of meh. It was just sort of like, oh look, here's like a female penguin, and we're gonna lean, and we're gonna lean hard into like the 40s aesthetic. I'm like, I don't know, but then like I saw the second episode, and right, because that is basically what the real golden. See, Clayface was a real Golden Age villain. Not all of them were, but that's what the original Clayface was. He wasn't a shape changer. He was just an actor that was good at impersonating people. Basil Carlo. Of course, they eventually turned him into the ultimate Clayface because there's no point in me doing this. But I might as well do this. So, having watched Batman the animated series in the 90s before I really got into the comics, I always associated, here's a good tie-in. You know who played Matt Hagen, Clayface on Batman the animated series? Ron Perlman.
Ah, okay. That works.
So anyway,
a lot of audio
right.
stuff.
So for years I thought that was like the definitive like Clayface until I found there's actually been many Clayfaces. There's been at least 4. There might even be more now. And as things stand now and have stood for at least 10, 15 years in the continuity, Basil Carlo, the original guy, is everything you saw like Matt Hagen do. Like he's a big clay monster. He can turn into people, but he's also a big, monster, kind of like he's. But Matt Hagen originally was not the actor. So what they did for the show is they combined Matt Hagen plus a third Clayface and Basil. So for years I didn't realize that Matt Hagen wasn't like that at all in the comics originally. Matt Hagen was actually a treasure hunter that fell into like a mystical pile of mud or some bullshit. But anyway, the original Basil Carlo didn't have powers at all. But as time has gone on, now he has all the powers. So usually now it is when you see Clayface in the comics, it is Basil Carlo, and he's basically what you would picture, like a big, huge monster, but he can turn into things. But that's not how he started at all. He started like how he's in Caped Crusader, which was an actor with a messed up face that could impersonate people, but not like a big monster
giant
or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I did love that in the animated series, the way they portray Clayface.
Yeah, and that is again that's what Carlo's like now. But anyway, they made it like but they mixed and matched because Matt Hagen wasn't actually an actor. They took the Carlo backstory and called it Matt Hagen and then added some Hagen things. That's fine, stuff like that happens all the time. But I didn't know that for a long time, because actually Clayface hadn't shown up in comic. Clayface wasn't in the comics in the 90s very much at all. Now I think about it. I can't really think of 90s storylines that had Clayface. Or there might have been some, because that was a time when there was a million Batman comics going at the same time. You had Batman, the 2 flagships, Batman and Detective Comics, but you also had Shadow of the Bat, and you also had what's it called? What's the other one? Legends of the Dark Knight. And then you had other ones too that were shorter lived, moving in and out. Like there was an oversaturation of Batman comics in the 90s. It was kind of nuts. But anyway, I would recommend. I'm glad. I figured Jake would like the show, but I would recommend Caped Crusader to you. It's good. Like I said, the first episode I was underwhelmed, and I was like, oh, this is what they're going to do, just like change a bunch of characters. My only gripe with Caped Crusader, and it's not a big deal, is I think maybe I'm so attached to the Harvey Bullock of the comics and of the 90s show that I don't like this Harvey Bullock, because in this one, Harvey Bullock, spoilers, is a fully dirty cop. Like he's not like a cop that breaks the rules sometimes, or a cop that's basically good but hates Batman. He's a full-on dirty cop, and they partner him up with Flass, who is the original dirty cop from Batman Year One by Frank Miller. And they're just basically 2 dirty cops. I kept waiting for like I expected Flass to stay bad, but I was waiting for like an arc where like maybe Bullock starts to get like kind of good, but it doesn't happen. That's really the only thing I don't like though. So that's kind of a picky thing that doesn't really matter. But yeah, I think you'd like it. It's good. And obviously excellent animation and voices and all that stuff. Definitely excited, hoping for a season 2. We've been really lucky lately with these cartoons. Just like the X-Men cartoon, like X-Men 97, I had high hopes and it blew past them. X-Men 97 is
really
fucking incredible.
Yeah,
like,
I've heard a lot of people say it's really good.
It's better than I could have imagined it could have been.
Wow.
Like, I was hoping for good because I like it's another fucking level. It's great. So
cool. I'll just check.
Yeah,
that
we've
out.
been really fortunate lately for animated comic stuff, because I think those are both. I mean, Batman's really good, and I'd say X-Men's excellent. Like excellent. Like again, it blew my expectations away, and I had fairly high expectations. So we've been pretty fortunate on that front.
Well, what it is you've got guys that grew up with that, or people that grew up with that, and then now they're our age and they're able to, you know, make that, you know, what they remember. So
The funny thing is, like, even before that came out, and I'm sure it probably shut a lot of people up because of how fucking good it was. Like, it was, of course, there was like some stupid like backlash by like that crowd that still uses the word woke. It's like X-Men's all woke now. I'm like, X-Men's like the original woke comic, if you want to use that terminology.
right.
What the fuck did you think it was about? It was about fighting against the establishment and prejudice and being part of the out group and all the, you know, and all that.
I wish
stuff.
I wish we could eliminate that word from our vocabulary, man. I hate
it's
that
it's
word
lost
so
all
much.
it's lost all fucking meaning. It
Yeah.
lost all meaning. Like people that say it now.
Well,
And
it
it's not
means
like
it means so many different things. You know, it can mean, you know, whatever, you know, now.
it's mostly a buzzword by like, you know, angry people that hate things like diversity now, basically.
But
You know?
I mean, who are these people? I mean, you know, X-Men's very diverse. It always has been. I mean, you know, like
I mean, that's
don't know.
again one of the saddest parts about the internet is slowly learning how much so many fandoms suck. It's like, I mean, of course, we had our reckoning with Comicsgate a few years ago. I'd like to think that those people, there's not too many of them, but they just give a loud voice. So they can all yell in their echo chamber about how comics are dying. I'm like, they're not. But okay, you go ahead and keep buying Ethan Van Scriver, or whatever the fuck his name's bullshit indie comics. You have fun with that because, you know, you're upset because there's more, I don't know, female writers at DC or whatever. Okay. Again, that's not a blanket defense saying, oh, everything Marvel and DC and the major people are putting out is perfect. Of course not. But it's never been. You know, it's good, it's bad, it ebbs, it flows. I like some artists, I like some writers, I don't like others. But these people that think that like a woke agenda or something has taken over and ruined the comics that they remember from their youth, it's just fuck off. So yeah, I just discredit anybody that uses that. But I just think of all the places it's been used, that's the most hilarious, to attack the X-Men show. I'm like, do you remember anything about X-Men at all? Like, what? Anything? Have you ever read X-Men? Have you ever watched the original cartoon? What did you think it was about?
And,
what did you think the, you know,
games too? I guess it's that audience, like the gaming audience and the comic audience is like another shitty word, toxic.
Right, and it makes me sad because I define myself as those things. Those are huge things in my life. So, you know, I mostly just have to ignore it and think, well, that's why, like, I don't, you know, outside of what you and I do and with a few other people, like, I've never been interested in being part of a community because I'm just like, that's just asking for trouble. On the surface, it seems fine. It's like, oh, it makes sense. That's like the internet is good because, you know, now you can meet people that have the same interests as you. On the surface, that sounds great. And then the next thing you know, you're down some rabbit hole of people arguing over the stupidest bullshit.
It's also okay to have differing opinions, guys. You know, it's kind of what makes a discussion interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know how that goes.
I mean, I can handle differing opinions. I just don't like it when people start getting, you know, like openly like racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. And that's where a lot of them will go. I watched the first season of the Sandman adaptation. It's good. Like, some of the events that happen are kind of out of order, but apart from that, it's good. I don't know. It's good that it helps reach another audience. I think Sandman didn't need an adaptation. I get why it got one because it's so popular and so influential. It's weird because everybody has different attitudes and opinions. As I said, I really like Sandman. It's important to me. But whether the show was good or not just wasn't important to me. A lot of people love it. I guess maybe I'll watch the second season. It got a second season, right? Certainly okay. The casting is very good. The effects are very good.
Go add these.
I don't know. I can't put my finger on why I can't love it the way people do. It's hard. I don't know. I don't want to spend all night here, but I'll bring up one more show because it's what everybody's blabbing about, and it's the Star Wars show. It's The Acolyte.
Okay.
And I don't hate it for the reasons that people want to scream that it's woke hate it, but it is very bad. Definitely. But to me, what makes it the most bad is that on paper, like its ideas and some of it had great potential. It could have been super fucking cool. And instead they just made every wrong decision. And I do like the look of it. I mean, they put $180 million into it, which is why it's not getting a second season. Because if you have an $180 million show and it doesn't please people, you're not getting greenlit for a second season. But I mean, that money is on the screen. It looks very good. I like the style. And I like the fight choreography. It's pretty good too. But I like how it's got a very clear wuxia influence, which I like a lot, which I think really fits Star Wars, since Star Wars already sort of comes from that. I mean, yeah, Star Wars a bit more the less Chinese wuxia, more Japanese samurai, but still those things have overlap. But yeah, I think Gaiman's really involved with that stuff, which I think is part of it. Like, Gaiman is not Stephen King. Stephen King doesn't take the check and say, okay, do whatever. Gaiman is involved. He's there. They listen to him. He has control. Like, Gaiman is he's not the control freak I probably would be. Gaiman trusts people and lets them make their decisions. But he obviously does his homework. He does his research. He doesn't trust the wrong people.
He's not going to let people
get his stuff.
He's not going to just give his work away for a check. He wants to be there to oversee some of the process, right. I guess,
Right. I think he had a bad experience with Mirror Mask, because Mirror Mask was like the first thing he did. Like, it wasn't an adaptation. He wrote a script for a movie. And even though it wasn't an adaptation, it still didn't turn out right. I think that kind of hardened him, that he had to be more on the ball about this kind of stuff. Like, Neil Gaiman is not the type of guy I was going to say, those people took my Mirror Mask and they fucked it up. Like, he's not that guy, right? He's not going to point fingers or blame people. But I think privately he realized that, it got away from him and people did stuff he didn't like. And, Mirror Mask isn't bad. It's just a completely forgettable movie. I think that kind of taught him some stuff. So that keeps him very hands-on and involved. I mean, as he's pointed out to people on Twitter and stuff, sometimes the people talk about casting. He's like, I'm actually not in charge of the casting. I let other people do that. But still, he's hands-on. So I would trust most things based on Gaiman to turn out good, because I think he has figured out, who he can trust with that, and he stays involved. Like you said, he's not like a hands-off guy that's like, here, do whatever you want with it. Right. He's part of it. So I would say you can trust most of those adaptations. I'm trying to think, like, what would I actually like to see adapted that hasn't been adapted? I don't know. And plus there's different things, right? Like, Ocean at the End of the Lane is a good novel that I like, but apparently the play is like breathtaking. So I really would love to see the play. Like, people are having like emotional breakdowns after watch, like, not in a bad way. Like, they're just overwhelmed by like how it makes them feel and stuff like that. Like, people have like lost their fucking minds on. Barker was at one point. I don't know if, I think maybe in recent years he's just been less active as he's gotten older. I think he was at a certain point. Yeah, I'm not as clear. Sure. I'm not as clear on Barker. I've certainly lost track of him. Obviously, he's older and he's probably not working as much as he was.
I mean, I'm trying to think, like, Midnight Meat Train is the last thing I can think. Well, no, he had
I saw that, yeah.
Another one after that wasn't too great.
They did a new Books of Blood.
Books of Blood, that's what it was.
But it's not very good.
No. But
I mean, you can't lay something like the new Candyman at his door, because he had like nothing to do almost with like the original Candyman movie. Like, the Candyman short story and the Candyman movie from 1992 have almost nothing in common.
Right.
The name.
It's Bernard. Oh, I don't remember his last name.
Okay.
I believe it was Bernard. Bernard Rose? Is that it?
Yeah. But this is going to sound funny. Like, as far as the Acolyte goes, it's bad in such a way that I will probably watch it again, which sounds insane. Because it's like, why would you waste your time? It's because I think it's even worse than I thought it was. Because I think there's stuff in there that I didn't even pick up on. It's not just bad, like, story-wise. It's like, it seems clear to me that it has some sort of direction to, like, and we talked about this before. I remember our friend Eric saying is like, when you have a property that's been around for a long time and people want to do something new with it, they want to like subvert expectations. Like, that's obviously what's going on in the Acolyte, but it's too much. It's too far. Because like, Okay, so it's set during the High Republic era, which is like the height of the Jedi's power. It's like before the prequels, because when you watch the Star Wars prequels, the idea is supposed to be like, even if like Palpatine wasn't there to fuck everything up, the Jedi were already sort of in decline. You know, there was problems, blah blah. You know, that's supposed to be what you're supposed to get out of the prequels. I'm not saying if you did or not, and I'm not saying those are perfect movies. I'm saying that's what's supposed to be conveyed, and you can pick that up a little better if you watch the Clone Wars show, because that gives you more context and more stuff. But anyway, the idea of the High Republic is this is the Jedi at their best and their highest. But this show is trying to make a point that, you know, just because that's the case, the Jedi aren't infallible, and some of them make mistakes and bad choices. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, I've read stories like that in novels and comics, and it's been fine. But the way they do it on this show, you'll just think every Jedi is a fucking moron. Like, it's just terrible to watch. And, like, I think the show creates some good characters, and then it just murders them all. By the time the show is over, the only people that are left are, like, the worst. So it's like, why would you want a second season where, like, all that's left are the worst characters who did the stupidest things? Like,
and it's not renewed, right? There is not going to be a second season of that.
No. And I mean, at first I thought the backlash was too much, and the backlash always is too much because people take this stuff too seriously. Like, I'm not gonna make
it's a huge property. Always going to be people that love it, people that hate it.
But I mean, what the main thing that bothers me about it is that it did have potential to be good. There are good things you can take away from it, but I can't say that it was good or enjoyable because of the way they twisted it. The characters make such stupid decisions, and it seems to be hitting us such stupid, like, because I mean, well, George Lucas was open to saying the Jedi weren't infallible and they can make mistakes, and often, you know, he had several stories that were about prominent Jedis falling to the dark side, obviously Anakin being the big one, but he's not the only one. Dooku was a Jedi. People forget Dooku was a Jedi before he fell and became a Sith, and there are Jedi that lose their way, but he was still saying, you know, there is like light and there's dark and there's good and there's bad and there's stuff in between, but like the way the show goes at this with a hammer is so clumsy. It's just like the Jedi don't know what they're talking about, and there's freedom in the darkness, and I don't know. It seems to be trying to say a lot of like edgy stuff. Like, it's trying to say there are no good guys and no bad guys, which I don't agree with. That works for a lot of things. It's like, yeah, it's like kind of real world, everybody's sort of gray. I don't think it works for Star Wars. And the thing that everybody liked about Andor, and I started watching, is like it illustrates that same point, but in a much better way. Because people are like, it shows, you know, not everybody working for the Empire is bad, not everybody working for the Rebellion is good, and both will do things. And apparently that's done in a satisfying way. I'll say in the Acolyte, it's not at all. The Acolyte is just like, the Jedi are a bunch of corrupt morons, and look how cool and edgy this dark side stuff is. And blah blah blah, and people make terrible decisions. I know I'm going to shut myself up there because we'll go on too long, and I'd rather keep this show tight. It's our first time back in a while. And I didn't want to turn it into a hangout, which happens a lot when Jay and I haven't been able to be online together, but hopefully we'll get together. But I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about things like, you know, like not just like the Joe Rogan experience, but things like that, you know, podcasts and stuff where they just get together and bullshit. I'm like, who wants to watch that? And I don't want to subject that to people. So I don't mind if we're on the show, we talk about some random stuff, but I don't want to start talking about like what I did with my day, or, you know, if I've switched up my exercise routine. I don't want to subject people to that bullshit.
I mean, we're at least somewhat on topic here. I mean, we're talking about, you know, new you know, properties and stuff.
Right. So I'm just trying to reel myself in a little bit, because I mean, anybody can do it and stuff like that, and we can save it for other shows too. But we can spin back to Pan's Labyrinth, unless you had something else. Yeah, go ahead.
No, back to Del Toro. Just to get us back on track here. He obviously has a fascination with insects and maybe praying mantis in general, because I think that's what the fairy is at first in the movie.
It's like a stick insect. Are they called stick insects? The ones
it is a stick.
Like,
it's not a. Okay. I was thinking it was a praying mantis.
Yeah, I don't think it's a mantis because it doesn't have the right head.
Similar.
Yeah, I mean, close enough. Like, I don't even know if it's supposed to be a real insect, right? It could be like a made up just for the sake of it. Maybe it's like a combination stick insect praying mantis. It could be.
Have you seen his director's cut of Mimic?
Yeah.
I didn't really think it was that much better.
It doesn't really change things for me, no.
But it makes me just wish that he could have gotten, you know, I mean, not only Final Cut, but the ability to do some stuff he would have liked to have done. But
Yeah, I
that's
mean, I feel like I don't really like Mimic very much, but I do feel like if he could make it now with like a big
it's
budget, it could be a really good movie.
it's
Right?
something I want to like so much more than I do, because it's such a cool concept and an interesting idea. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But yeah,
so we can
that
get
kind of
back to
stuff
that.
obviously is like. I think I told you this before. Actually, when I went to see Mimic, one of my friends walked out because he's too afraid of that kind of stuff.
Oh, really? Wow.
He's really afraid of bugs and stuff like that. He couldn't hang in.
Man. Have you seen the sequels to
Yeah.
Mimic?
No,
They made like 2 or 3
never seen.
sequels. Yeah.
I'm not surprised because stuff like that always gets those like direct to
Yeah.
video sequels, but
Yeah.
no, I haven't seen them.
Yeah. So did
I think I'd probably
Tom
watch
Cox.
I'd rather watch like a Species sequel than a Mimic sequel, and they're bad.
Yeah, Species 2 is watchable. After that, I think it's pretty much downhill.
Well, yeah,
They flip
Totoro,
it. It's a male in part 2. The male astronaut, and
Oh,
he comes
I
home and
forgot that.
he bangs a lot of women
Yeah.
and has a lot of
Does that one have a hot tub scene? One of them has
That's
a
the
hot
first one.
tub scene.
That was the first one, I
Oh, is that
believe.
Oh, that's just the first one.
With
Okay.
with Henstridge shows her breasts.
Yeah, that's very good.
Oh yeah, that was definitely I was a big fan of that scene at one point in time.
Yeah, I'm seeing here something about comparing, saying at Labyrinth is kind of like Alice in Wonderland meets the boy in the striped pajamas, with some Brothers Grimm thrown in. That is a pretty good assessment.
Sure. Yeah.
Or read or see the boy in the striped pajamas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good, powerful story. This doesn't get quite that depressing, of course. There's no Holocaust going on, but
Yeah,
still
it's
not
pretty
great.
fucking depressing though.
It's still pretty fucking depressing, just in the small scale of the small scale, and it's depressing in the historical context. I know that like people like suffered under that government for the next 30 years. I mean,
that all of those guys probably died in the next few years.
Yeah, and like it's just a short scene, but there is some political commentary going on in that scene of the dinner scene where the various people are bit there, and you sort of see, they're kind of some of the important people in the area, and they're kind of showing how they're going along with this regime as they're supposed to, and it kind of shows like how they're like compromising themselves to do it. The priest is the best one, right? They're about how they're gonna have to kill all those fucking rebels, and the priest says, as a man of God, he says, "Well, God has already saved all their souls, so it doesn't really matter what happens to their bodies." So he's basically washing his hands of it, saying the Catholic Church is completely fine with you killing these fuckers because God loves them and will take care of them after they're dead. And that's another thing that links this to like fascism and Nazism. And like, I don't want to throw Catholics under the bus too much, although I don't feel too bad about it because the Catholic Church is awful. It's the Catholic, like that's a big part of the Francoism and the one with the L that I mentioned before that this ties into. Catholicism is a big part of it. No getting away from that. Mm-hmm. It's part of like it's part of the justification, right? If we get the church to sign off on this, then there's nothing wrong with what we're doing, which is something that goes back to the beginning of time. Like that's the best way.
We can kill them all, right?
Yeah, the best way to justify your atrocities is to somehow align it with whatever the church or God says. And I won't go on a big thing about religion, but there's some really good recent examples of Catholicism in the 20th century as far as that goes. How about creating that escape pipeline for the Nazis? Is that something the Catholic Church ever formally apologized for? No, they never apologized for that. No. But anyway, I don't mean to pick on the Catholics more than anybody else because I don't like any of it. But I mean, when you've got
they don't apologize for much. What's going on?
Even their apologies for things like like shuffling child molesting priests around is not much of an apology.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
But Guillermo del Toro,
would you ever like to cover Before the Devil Knows You're Dead?
Yeah, I'd be open to that. I know the title.
It's Ethan Hawke and Philip Seymour Hoffman, right?
Okay. I know the title.
Famous director too. Shoot. I can't think of his name, but yeah, great director. He probably has passed away by now. older guy. I'm sure Jacob will clue me in on who that is.
Supposedly, Del Toro is still working on some sort of adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness. So I don't know
There it is.
if that's ever going to happen.
He's always got like a handful of things he's working on that, half of it's never going to see any light. So
yeah,
I guess that's
the only
good.
thing he's done that I really don't like very much is Pacific Rim. And I know that sounds crazy because it's like, I'm a big anime guy and you like kaiju and all that. I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't like this. I don't like how they did it. I don't like Pacific Rim.
He did direct that?
The first one. I think, is there a sequel? He directed the first one.
Man,
I mean, he did. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I saw that sequel and it was at a theater, just gotten the new, fully reclining stadium seats. And I think I slept through 75% of that movie.
I mean, he's a writer-director. Almost everything he directs, he also wrote. Blade 2 is like the only thing he didn't like write the script for.
And it's a great movie.
It's pretty good.
Best in that trilogy, I would say.
I still like the first one best, but I think it's probably about equal. Yeah.
I like the first one a lot.
I don't think of the third one as bad. Like most people think of the third one as bad.
No, I don't either.
It should be bad. Like the villain's a joke and Wesley Snipes himself is barely trying and acting all weird. We've all heard Patton Oswalt's stories about the way he acted on set and stuff like that. But I still like it as lame as it is. Part of it is like Ryan Reynolds is basically doing a pre-Deadpool thing. His Hannibal King is basically Deadpool before Deadpool.
Yeah.
Parker Posey is great as an uber bitch vampire. You gotta love Parker Posey. A big fan of her. I was thinking we got to do some of her like indie stuff because one of the things I did rent at the library before the damn strike happened was I watched the movie The Day Trippers, which was always a movie I'd heard the title of. I didn't know it was. It's one of those. Like, it's an indie movie from the '90s. She's in it. Liev Schreiber's in it.
Okay.
It's just basically about this small like family that goes into New York and a bunch of bullshit happens, and a lot of it is it's one of those movies, indie movies. It's kind of shot guerrilla style on the streets of New York, and there's a lot of improvised dialogue. It's very much like I think came out in '98. It's like a perfect example of like quirky '90s indie movie. You would definitely like it. Like I'm not saying it's amazing or anything, but it just made me realize that like Parker Posey has done a lot of that stuff, and I'm thinking we need to do something where she does that. She's pretty cool in the movie.
96? Does that sound right?
Okay, I thought it was 98. Yeah, maybe it was 96. You're right. I don't know. It could be 96.
No,
it's a cool movie. It's just a short movie. It's just like 90 minutes long, if that. Might even be shorter. It's like, as I said, it's a guerrilla style movie that they shot pretty fast because they didn't have the permits or anything like that. There's improvised dialogue. It's basically just a series of conversations and people getting on each other's nerves. But it's good. It's interesting. And it just sort of hammered home that like Parker Posey in those days was like one of the queen of the indie film. I don't want to say she's underappreciated. I just feel like she's appreciated by certain people, but not enough people are aware of like how good she is. And even in something crazy like Blade 3, like she stands out. Yes, it is.
Did you like Nightmare Alley?
Yeah. I mean, I could sort of see where it was going, but I mean, it's closer to a more straightforward adaptation. It's based on a novel with the same name from like the 40s. It's the type of thing, again, speaking of the things Del Toro's into, he's really into that, right? He's into like 19th century or early 20th century, like circuses and freak shows. He likes that look and that aesthetic, so this is drenched in that. That's what it is, right?
I don't know that I ever finished it. I think I watched about half of the stories.
If you watched about half of it, you can probably tell where it's going and how it's going to end, I would assume. I like it. I like it. It's not like something I'm going to like revisit or anything, but I mean, everything about it hits. It has a great look. Del Toro does. Ever since at least the early 2000s, Del Toro has had a really good look to his movies. It's not like Kronos doesn't look good, but it is sort of a cheaper movie, so it doesn't look as good as others. And some of that's just out of his control. But I mean, when he's got a budget, he knows what to do with it. His movies always look really good. He works with good cinematographers, nice sets, and props and all that shit. it all looks really good. So I like Nightmare, but it's not something I would really be in any hurry to revisit or analyze. But it's a good movie. It's a good thing for him to do. It fits his wheelhouse nicely. I was kind of impressed by Bradley Cooper. I hadn't really seen him act like that before, so that was kind of cool. Shows a little bit of range on his part.
May have to go back and finish that one.
And as I mentioned very early on, even though he's had ties to things like Tales of Arcadia and Troll Hunters and things, but I mean, clearly he's a fan of animation, which I like. Like, he doesn't usually work directly in animation; it's not his thing, but he's obviously a big fan of it. So again, that's another reason why I like him. It means a lot to him. He's friends with people that do it and is involved with it. And he's always championing and propping up various animated things. So that means a lot to me as a big animation fan. Probably my weirdest take on Del Toro is, as bad as the Hobbit movies turned out, I think they would have been worse if it was him. Like, I really do feel like it's better, even though I don't like the Hobbit movies, and there's no way there should have been 3 of them, and they're bloated, and they add way too much stuff. I think it's still better that we got the continuity of Peter Jackson still doing them.
Wasn't he going to do them at first? Wasn't Del Toro?
Yeah, it was going to be Del Toro. That's what I'm saying. I think and a lot of people, and it's easy to say because it's not like the Hobbit movies are very good. They're not. So a lot of people say, oh, imagine if Del Toro did them. But I actually think it'd be worse. I honestly do. But that's a complete hypothetical. There's no way of knowing that for sure. I just feel like we don't need that disconnect. Like, even if the Hobbit movies aren't very good, at least they have they feel connected. And I don't think they would feel connected, even if it's the same cast and everything. I just don't think it would work with Del Toro's style. Plus, I feel like Del Toro is not really the guy for epic stories. I don't think that's his thing.
Well, he wants to do.
He could prove me wrong.
He's written,
he could prove me wrong.
Yeah, he wants to be writer director, and it's worked well for him so far. So
yeah. I think that's better off. I'm not saying, if he made, a Hobbit movie, it'd be shit. I just think that, I just think the Peter Jackson movies, yeah. I mean, if they just made them 2, it probably could have been pretty good. But stretching it to 3 long movies, honestly, the first one, I think is almost perfectly fine. I pretty much have no problem with the first one. An Unexpected Journey, I think it's fine. It's after that they start getting bloated and silly.
I've never seen any of them, but
I would say the first one's worth watching. But you might say maybe it's not worth watching because it ends, sort of cliffhanger-y, right? Because it ends with so much more to go on. Like, they don't even meet the dragon in the first one, right? The first one ends with the tease that the dragon's still there waiting for them. So it might feel a little incomplete. But I would say the first one's good. Even the director's cut, which is longer, is good. I own it and I like it. It's after that. I don't really like how the dwarves look because they don't look like dwarves. Like, Gimli looked like a dwarf. And I know they're trying to make it so the dwarves don't all look exactly the same. They stand up from each other, but they don't even look like dwarves. They just look like guys. Not all of them even had fucking beards. It's crazy. So,
I bet the studio was probably the reason why it was 3 movies. They wanted another trilogy to milk it for money.
Yeah. It's so bloated. I mean, The Hobbit's not a long book. It was a children's book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you I'm talking about disconnect, it is kind of funny because if you read The Hobbit and then you read The Lord of the Rings, it's completely different. Because The Hobbit was written with children in mind and kept quite simple, and then
I think The Hobbit was I was reading that in 7th grade or something, or
me
grade
too.
7.
I think I was 12 when I read The Hobbit, and then right after, my sister's like, "Well, here's Lord of the Rings," and I was about 13 and read The Lord of the Rings. Then I read The Lord of the Rings every year until the movie came out, from 1996 or 7 right up to 2001. The movies came out. I read them every year. Now I read them every once in a while.
And that was back when
being
a nerd was not a positive term. Now it's I'm a nerd, I like pop vinyl figures and Marvel movies. I'm a nerd,
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, people can be whatever they want.
I was a fucking nerd.
Patch whatever labels. But I'm just saying, yeah. I mean, there was something to be said about liking stuff when it definitely wasn't popular. Look,
Yeah.
I like popular things. It's not like I don't.
Yeah.
I've liked many popular things. But I'm saying if you wheel back all the stuff that's popular now, it wasn't popular when I was growing up and it was a big deal to me. Do you think anybody wanted to hear me when I was in high school talk to them about Batman comics?
Like, man, I like that back before it was cool. You know.
I mean, and that's how I'll come off that I like stuff
Is
before
it,
it's
but
cool.
it, but
But I
it's
mean,
such a
there is,
hipster
but there's
thing
a,
to say, you know.
yeah, no. And
Man,
again, and in a way, like it is good to see things like comics and video games, which are huge to me, become so big. But there was something kind of neat about it being a smaller world in a way. I don't know. I almost feel the same way about fantasy.
yeah,
Like fantasy came into its own early in the 2000s because of the Lord of the Rings movies, which is excellent. But I always think like if I was older, if I was say like a teenager in the early 80s, how interesting it would have been then. Because the fantasy landscape was so small and unknown, it would have felt so secret. I can just imagine like my 14-year-old self. Let's say I was born in like I don't know, we'll say like 1970. So I was like 13 in 1983. I picture like my 1983 self like reading Michael Moorcock movies or reading Michael Moorcock novels and listening to Rush,
yeah,
you know, and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And like I would have to do it on a very small scale. There's no internet to meet people. I might have friends. I might not. I might be all alone in my room all day reading this stuff, listening to this stuff,
yeah,
you know. It's interesting, like we're in a position now where like we can figure out where we would be if we were older. Like I said, if I was let's say I was like 5 years, only 5 years older than I am. It's like speaking of Neil Gaiman. If I was say 4 or 5 years older than I am, that means like in 1993 I would have been in like my mid-teens instead of like 10, which means I totally would have been that Neil Gaiman fan. I would have been sitting in my room in 1993 reading, you know, reading Sandman. I'd be listening to Tori Amos. You know, I was just a couple years too young, and I'd be wearing all black. But I was just a couple years too young for that. You know, so like I know where my sensibilities lie. So I know if you plugged me into a historical setting, like where I would fit in, what I'd be listening to. Because I mean, there's stuff I found out later in life, but if I was older and had found it earlier, you know, I might have been able to experience it when I was young. I mean, there's never a wrong time to find something, but you always feel good.
Sure.
I always feel good to, you know, have been onto something when it was new. That's always just sort of an exciting thing, especially to attach it when you're young. It's we're facing diminishing returns as we get older. More stuff is available to us, but it feels less special, right?
That's 100%. It's more is out there, but you know, it's.
I mean, Lord Michaels summed it up pretty well with just talking about Saturday Night Live. Lord Michaels always said, you know, whatever cast was active when you were in junior high, that's your favorite Saturday Night Live cast. And I kind of feel like that applies to a lot of other things too. Because that's when you're 100%. Making the transition from kid into adolescent, and this stuff means so much to you, and it's starting to be part of your identity. And you know,
Chris Farley, David Spade, you know, Dana Carvey, all those guys, you know,
Adam Sandler, Phil Hartman.
Exactly. But I liked the cast after that too, and then I kind of fell off, like when, you know, like Sandberg and Bill Hader left and stuff. I haven't really cared as much about it.
Yeah, they were the last really good people. I love Bill Hader. I'll say that. Yeah. Bill Hader's awesome.
But
you
know, what you were saying, you know, a lot of stuff is related to like having older siblings. You know, will get you into stuff, and I've heard a lot of people say that, and I'm the same way. Like my brother and sister got me into music that I wouldn't have.
That's where my reading a lot of music came from. My sister.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, like my sister was the Tori Amos fan. My sister's 3 years older than me, so she was the Tori Amos fan. So I mean, eventually I did hear through Tori Amos through her, but by that time I was already, you know, I had my own bands that I liked more. But yeah, she's how that's how I read so many of the books that I read growing up, because she passed them on to me, or even read them to me directly. Because that's one thing my sister and I did. I think we were closer to a lot of siblings that had that much of a gap. 3 years doesn't sound like much, but when you're kids, it is. In that we were close, in that we would even read books together, read out loud to each other. We would do that right into our teens. So yeah, we definitely influenced each other. Her more on me because she was the older sibling, finding stuff out. Like one of my favorite bands of all time, Manic Street Preachers. I heard that because of Mary. You know. Now I'm probably a bigger fan of them than she is. Like I don't think she kept up with them the way I did, but yeah. So she definitely exposed me to things. I'd like to think I exposed her to some things too, even though I was younger. But I don't know.
Trying
But
to
actually,
think
it's
of
funny
that.
because I haven't talked to her in a while. And we were talking just today, and she was telling me about some. She asked me if I'd seen Leslie Vernon, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, and I was like, "Yeah, I saw him in theaters in 2006."
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, I just saw it. It was really good." I was like, "I guess we need to talk more." I guess our paths.
What was the I think Tori Amos was on there. It was a bunch of female bands that toured around for a couple years together. Did she ever Lilith Fair, did she ever go to that?
No, but she's the exact person that would have.
That's what I was gonna say. It seems like something that she would enjoy.
It's like Sarah McLachlan and
what was the
Sarah McLachlan and Indigo Girls and
oh man.
I would assume Sheryl Crow.
Yeah, who is the God is one of us. Who's that? That chick.
Oh, that's not Jewel. I always think that's Jewel, but it's not Jewel. Because that's like a
Jewel
one.
Jewel probably would have been on it. Maybe who is the God? I can't think of names today. Like with the glasses, she always had glasses.
Lisa Loeb.
Lisa Loeb, yeah. That seems like she may have been a part of that type stuff. It's
funny, Lisa Loeb's aged really well because I was watching an episode of That 90s Show and she's in it as herself in like a.
Oh, really?
It's just a funny little bit where like the main character, who's Eric Foreman's daughter, and she's like imagines herself in the Stay video, so she's wearing glasses and she's doing around the apartment, but Lisa Loeb herself is like in the background yelling at her, telling her to get out of there. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I always had a thing for her.
Yeah, she's cool. She was she got her break basically through Ethan Hawke. Like that song became a big thing because of Reality Bites, because she was friends with Ethan Hawke.
Cool.
But yeah.
That same group, she'd probably be about 50 something now as well.
Yeah. But she has like a condition where like I wear contacts. She can't, so that's why she always wore glasses.
But she was wearing glasses when that wasn't a thing, but she made it, her brand. That's how I knew when I said the girl that wears the glasses, you knew who I was talking about, because
like a nerd chic thing. I mean, she wasn't doing it on purpose. She had to wear glasses, but yeah.
It was hot though. I was into it. Still am.
I mean, I guess there was a bit. I could think of others that were more like Natalie Imbruglia or something. Oh, remember the video for Torn? Oh my god, she's so cute in the Torn. She's so cute in the video.
That's a good song too.
I mean, I used to be so focused on like girls in videos that like I'm not even talking about the artist. I'm talking about like background girls in videos are still memories to me, for fuck's sake. Like remember when Santana had that massive album where they had all the guest stars on it, and the first one was Smooth with like go watch the Smooth video with Rob what's his name?
That's somebody. That actress is somebody too.
There's a couple of them. One of them's in a green shirt and her like nipples are showing through the shirt the whole time. But there's a couple of them. What's his name? Rob. He's Matchbox 20.
Rob Thomas.
Rob Thomas, yeah. Rob Thomas. Yeah, like yeah. That's a good boost. Like those are just background dancers, but they stick in my mind. I remember there was like it wasn't a good song, but there was a weird Bryan Adams video from like 99 or 2000 when Bryan Adams was kind of making a weird transition because he was older, because he'd done like 80s stuff, right? So it was Bryan Adams kind of like awkwardly being like a 90s alternative guy, even though that's not what he was. And I don't even remember what the song is, but it has like this really hot Asian girl in it that I was obsessed with. And that was before I even became like unhealthily having unhealthy fixations on poor Asians. So I just mean, yeah. So I can remember specific like beautiful women from like music videos where they weren't even like the main person or anything. They're just there, but like, formative time for you. So you remember that stuff.
Sure. Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can figure out those ladies' names.
From Smooth?
Yeah. See if
there were two in particular that were really close to him doing the dance. Like there were various women. There were two in particular that were really close dancing.
Damn it.
But one of them had like dark shortish hair, I think, and like a green shirt. And man, she was something. was funny. Another person I fixated on, even though I didn't like her music, was Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson. You ever like remember that video for "Go Deep" about the kids throwing the party and there's like water or something? She is so gorgeous in that.
Or what was the one where they were in space?
With Michael. That's
with
Scream.
Michael, yeah. Scream,
at the time, that was the most expensive music video ever made. At the time, I'm sure it's been surpassed, but at the time, it was the most expensive video from '95 or so.
That's another concept that I just think kids today can't understand how important that was in our. I just watched music videos, and I know I've said this 100 times on the show before, but just watched music videos all night.
Because most of them, a lot of them back then, I don't know what, not all of them, but a lot of the ones to me, they had the song, but they were also like little art films, basically.
Yeah,
they're little art films with a song that you liked. But yeah, it's hard to recapture that. So did I, Jacob. That's what I've been on a Manic Preacher's kick lately, and I kicked it off by saying I need to listen to the Holy Bible again, which is not usually where I start. And it's not where I started back then. Back then, I was like a lot of North American fans, and this came from Mary, and that she owns. The only album they did over here that really made much of a dent was their 98 album, This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours. Because their only real hit over here was that lead single, which I still think holds the record for the longest song title to be a #1 hit without the use of a parenthesis, which is, if you tolerate this, your children will be next. Which is an amazing song. But no, I wanted to listen to something while Richie was still in the band. And actually lately I've been watching on YouTube, I've been watching live performances where Richie's still around. It's really interesting. It's hard to find an equivalent for somebody like Richie in other bands. Like he's kind of like a position that doesn't really exist in most bands because most people would find him superfluous. Because he technically played guitar, but he wasn't much of a guitarist. He contributed almost no guitar on the albums at all. In fact, I think there's only 2 or 3 songs in their entire catalog where you can actually hear Richie's actual guitar. It's been over exaggerated that he's like this terrible guitarist. He wasn't. He just wasn't good enough to really be a professional. That's all it is, right? But when the band started, their bassist, Nicky Wire, wasn't either. He got better. Like, maybe Richie would have gotten better if he'd lived, assuming he's not still alive somewhere. Maybe, some people like to believe Richie's still alive somewhere. I like to believe it. It just seems really, really, really unlikely. But when that started, the musical drivers for the band still are to this day, and that's James Dean Bradfield and Moore, the drummer Sean Moore, who are cousins, by the way. They were the real songwriters. They were the real musicians. I would say eventually Nicky Wire became a very good bassist because if you play long enough, you're going to get good. Richie, sure. I don't know. I don't know if Richie had stayed, if he even would have stayed in the band. Like, I don't know what. He was obviously unhappy and troubled. It's very interesting. But I can't think of another band that has an equivalent like Richie. Because Richie technically was the other guitarist, but he didn't really do that. Although he did it sometimes. His main point was to contribute lyrics. And besides that, he did stuff like artwork and stuff like that. It'd be kind of like if when Elton John formed his band, and he had a band that he had for many years in the 70s, he had a specific band. He didn't just have hired guns. He had a specific band that he recorded and toured with for the first 5 or 6 years. He blew it up in the mid 70s, basically because he'd reached the top and didn't know what else to do with himself. So he started a new band because I need a new direction. But anyway, he had a very specific band. It'd be like that. It'd be like tantamount to Elton John putting together his band in the late 60s and then getting Bernie Taupin and saying, you can play something too. And Bernie Taupin's like, I'm not a musician. He'd be like, that's fine. You're in the band. That would be kind of what it would be like. But yeah, for sure he did. It's super legit when it comes to a guy like that. People will talk about certain people and their ability to do that, but I would say it's pretty legit with him. Anyway, we'll finish up here on the movie. I love this movie. Is it my favorite Del Toro movie? I don't know, because I think I have to see Devil's Backbone again because it's been too long since I last saw it.
This is much grander scale, much grander scale than Devil's Backbone.
Right. It has a lot more, it's a story. It has more effects and environments and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just really like the Devil's, and I mean, I like the Devil's Backbone for its simplicity, right? It's a fairly simple
Sure.
one location story told in a simple way. So comparing on that, it's kind of difficult to compare them. I think this probably is my favorite, which is maybe a little bit obvious. Maybe most people wouldn't say that. They'd want to pick something like a Crimson Peak or a Devil's Backbone or even Cronus, which is his very first movie. I just feel he has like a Frankenstein movie coming or something. Has it come out? I don't know. Oscar Isaac's in it.
Surely it hasn't come out. That may not. That may have been part of that Universal thing where they were trying to revamp the Universal monsters again. It didn't work.
Yeah. Probably the weirdest thing about me and Del Toro is, speaking of animation, is that you would think I would have been like right there when the Pinocchio was made, but I don't like Pinocchio, so I don't watch it. That's a big, I guess, sort of what's the word? Contradiction about me. I don't like Pinocchio in any form, animated, live action, puppets. I don't like Pinocchio. I think it's one of the most like overrated stories in fiction. It's one of the most like influential stories in fiction, and I don't like it. I've never liked it. So I mean, maybe I'll watch it sometime, but I don't think I will. So that seems like a really weird thing for somebody like me. You'd be like, well, wouldn't you be all over this? It's animated, fantasy, classics. I don't like Pinocchio. I don't like any of it.
It has a pretty good score.
Yeah, no, people were raving about it. So I don't know. Maybe I will.
Going through.
He co-directed that with someone else because animation. So we don't remember who the director was. But yeah, I would say, at least by recency bias, this is my favorite of his movies. He had planned some sort of loose sequel to this, but I guess it's never going to happen, which is probably maybe for the best. I think it's better to do like completely original movies. You don't need series and sequels. That seems to work better for him. But I do hope he returns to this sort of dark fantasy realm. It's not like he ever fully left or anything like that. But stuff like Nightmare Alley and Shape of Water are cool. I like them, but I like a further fantasy like this.
Did he win Best Picture for that?
For Shape of Water, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty fucking amazing that he was able to do that. Wonder how they finagled that, man. How did he do that? Must have been a terrible year.
Made an impression on people. I think it's part of just there being sort of a shift, where they're really realizing we've ignored movies like this for decades. It's time to maybe give them their due type thing. I mean, I feel we're going to finish. I swear we're going to finish. I'm not going to sing. And I've said many times how I don't care about the Academy Awards, the Oscars. It doesn't matter to me. But one opinion I have on them is it seems like a lot of the time, if you have certain actors or directors that like consistently go up for the awards and don't win, that sometimes when they win, it's almost more like a makeup. Like a lot of people think like when Leonardo DiCaprio won, I think for The Revenant, most people are like, it's not really The Revenant. It's like he's done better work, but he didn't win for those. So it's kind of more like a recognition of that. And I kind of feel like maybe it's sort of this, and it wasn't specifically for Del Toro, but it was more for like those sort of fantasy genre type thing. It's like, okay, we got to give this its due. And Del Toro has a lot of buzz. And like, I still think it's very cynical. I still think it's very political. I'm not saying winning an Academy Award isn't significant. It's significant from many standpoints, but it doesn't matter to me because it can afford not to matter to me. I don't work.
He seems like the type of guy that could give a shit less too. Like he knows it's a good movie. That's all he cares about.
And that's definitely something to respect about him, right? Like he was always going to do his own thing. If he was going to get recognition, fine. But if not, fine. He just wanted to do his thing, like you said, and work on his projects.
When he screened this, Stephen King sat next to him, and he said that when the Pale Man came out, Stephen King was squirming in his seat, and he said that was better than winning an Academy Award. So,
I mean, it's pretty good when you have somebody like Stephen King being like, "Man, I wish I thought of that."
Yeah, like, man, that's just freaky shit.
A guy who's made his like career like doing that kind of stuff. I feel like there was more we could have said about some of the philosophical things in this movie, but I don't want to drag this out. I'll just say, I mean, it's not a super great analysis, but yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy it. I really like the juxtaposition of early Franco era Spain and the resistance fighters and this girl's poor plight and what her mother was trying to teach her about life versus fairy tales, and how it actually shows us fairy tales can be just as dark or evil as real life, at least in this world. Some of the parallels and how they overlapped. I thought it was really creative and an interesting story. It has won me over probably as his best movie. I just think it's a really interesting story, really well told, with all the stuff you expect from it. It's dark, it looks good, it's creepy, it has nice music. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but it has that main theme, which is the little lullaby that not her mother, but Mercedes sings for her, which is very good and very memorable. And you can hear it and you picture dark. So I mean, I don't think it's anybody who's watched this sort of stuff knows I like dark, and not that everything dark is automatically good, but I mean, I love fantasy, but if I like something more than fantasy, it's dark fantasy. And again, this is a little bit different because it intersects with the real world. And my favorite fantasy is just completely imagined worlds, but this is proof that you can do both. And it's kind of funny. It's like, because like I said, like the one thing I finished, The Dark Staircase, it's actually, real meeting fantasy. So, I mean, the main reason I haven't written completely completed fantasy world is because I'm not talented enough to make one, right? Thanks a lot. Come up with your own world. I mean, only the really best people can do it. And a lot of my favorite worlds, they're not one person. That's why I'm amazed by something like, I know I'm always sucking off George R.R. Martin for Song of Ice and Fire. But to me, that is the work of one man is staggering to me. People can complain that it's taking forever, but I mean, he's doing it by his fucking self. Like, he's not brainstorming or bouncing it off other people. They aren't coming up with ideas. It's all him. He's laying it all out. I mean, he has editors and stuff, I know, but I mean, he's the idea guy. It's all him. I love the Marvel and DC universes, but they were put together slowly by dozens, if not hundreds of people through the decades. And they're more like what you would call fantasy kitchen sinks, right? Which is kind of just throw in whatever you want. Which, I mean, there is a certain charm to that. Like something like the world of Dragon Ball is that. It's Dragon Ball, they didn't know how long it was going to run or anything. So Toriyama just sort of kept adding things as they went, and luckily it kind of worked. So, I mean, fantasy kitchen sinks are cool. I like them. But my favorite kind of fantasy is sort of like a very Tolkien type thing, a world with a history and set rules, and, certain things will fit into it and certain things won't. But anyway, Pan's Labyrinth is the kind of fantasy that is, a fantasy meeting reality, which I'm usually not a big fan of because I think it's hard to do. I think this is about as well as you can do it. I really like it. And it's always, as I said, it's really influential to me. It definitely influenced that story I wrote. And it remains my favorite movie by him, but he's a great filmmaker. He's a cool guy. Hopefully he still has lots of movies ahead. I don't want to say I was disappointed in his recent output, but I would like to see a return to something kind of closer to this in the future. So we'll see what happens.
Sure. Yeah, I think Kronos is still my favorite of his, but I do love this movie.
I do need to see Kronos again because it's been a long time.
I was able to see this in the theater and then bought the Blu-ray soon after.
Yeah, I should get the Blu-ray of this, but at least I still have the old DVD, which is something. But yeah, maybe since I shouldn't be busy over the next few days, I should watch it with his director commentary. Because I'm sure, like, he's an interesting guy. He must have some. Yeah. It's funny how like disappointing some director commentaries can be, but I don't think he'll disappoint me. One other thing is like this also has not just director's commentary, but if you just watch the movie normal, there is a director's intro where he talks for just like about a minute, and he points out that the movie like almost killed him. And remember how he used to be like a fat guy and now he's not? Like this movie's like the main reason. He says he lost like 45 pounds making this movie because he was like sick and stressed and everything. But
is he not fat anymore? I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, he's always been a bit fat, but like he's not fat like he used to be. Kind of like the way Peter Jackson went from like fat to like almost skinny. Whenever that happens, it's jarring. It was like, it's not right.
Oh yeah. You're supposed to be huge.
I remember like when Drew, like it's a million years ago. Remember when Drew Carey was fat? Now he's just like kind of this small guy, like because he was never tall, right? So if you take the fat out, he's just kind of a small guy.
Drew Carey is turning into Bob Barker. Like he had the eye surgery, so he doesn't need glasses anymore. So he just wears it. You know, I'm sure
I
he's
mean,
banging
I
all
respect.
the ladies.
Yeah, it sounds like the most boring and stupid job ever, but I understand why you would do it because it's guaranteed work and good money.
Sure.
I'm not going to go to a whole thing about being a comedian because I'm not one. But to me, it just seems a little stifling as a comedian. The last thing I'll say on that note is I didn't see it, but apparently the new season of Wheel of Fortune just started, and that's got Ryan Seacrest now because what's his name? Finally, because he finally retired. Pat Sajak.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not like I've seen much with Ryan Seacrest because like I've avoided most of the shit he's had to do with over the last 20 years. But I mean, I will say Pat Sajak was a funny, witty guy, and I don't know if Ryan Seacrest has any wit to him whatsoever. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know why.
One of the last things
why do they need some guy that's going to demand a ton of money? Because that's like the best gig in the world. I mean, you work like what, maybe a month and a half out of the year. You shoot all the episodes, you get paid, $1 million an episode or whatever the hell it is.
I mean, I was never a big. It sounds crazy too. Another contradiction out of me is like I'm a man of words. I'm a man of writing. I'm a man of letters. That's my skill. My main skill is the English language and literature and stuff. I read super fast if I need to. I don't always try to, but if I push myself, I can read about 1,200 words a minute if I need to, and things like that. And that's why I do what I do. And I'm bad at Wheel of Fortune.
I am too.
I can't. I see the spaces, and you would think that should be so easy for someone like me who reads so much, who recognizes words so quickly, and I don't. You take the letters out, and I'm as lost and stupid as every other bastard. I mean, I'm not bad. Like, I'm not bad, but I'm just in no way good. Like, I don't have a talent for it, so I barely ever watched it. But it was nice. I don't know if it was just his last ever show, but it must have been one of his last ever shows. At the end, they just did like a little super cut of like him like making fun of various contestants for terrible guesses. It's really funny. I was like, I don't think Ryan Seacrest can do that, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm more of a Jeopardy fan myself, but it's just not the same without Alex.
I've been impressed. Like I've come around to Ken faster than I thought I would. I mean, I'm never going to forget Alex. It's one of my favorite people ever. It's definitely one of the best representatives.
It's just Ken now, right?
Ever had.
Like it's not a Blossom anymore.
No, she only was doing tournaments, and now I guess she doesn't even do that.
I didn't particularly enjoy her. She got fired for doing something that they weren't happy with. Some comment.
I did. I didn't really like her anyway. No, I didn't really like her anyway. I mean, Ken made a comment ages ago that people like roasted him for, which wasn't a good comment. But I mean, they forgave that, so I don't know.
Yeah, they were. Whatever. You say someone.
The Price is like I could care less about The Price is Right because it's like everything I hate about like the world. It's loud and crass and based on money. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with Price is Right in the way that like a lot of TV is wrong. I'm just saying it annoys the hell out of me.
Well, it's very much a show that you have to watch currently because you're like, okay, 1992, how much did a microwave cost?
Yeah,
$6,000. Who the fuck?
I did see an interesting documentary on Netflix a few years ago about like some guy that like he studied the show so much that he could be like perfect on it or something.
He beat it, yeah,
and he beat it.
He had a huge Excel spreadsheet of what things cost and everything. He knew that thing down to the T.
But I mean, I respect that. Why not do that?
Was it The Perfect Game or something like that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I hate how like just like I think it's ridiculous that like if you go to a casino and you are like smart enough to count cards, that's cheating. Are you fucking kidding me? The casino,
it's not cheating.
The whole thing's rigged. It's not even cheating, and yet they call it cheating. You're not allowed. They'll kick you out. Is what I mean. It's against their rules.
You just need to make it look like you don't know how to count cards. You're just, I got lucky again. Well, you got to lose a few hands, I guess.
Yeah,
you gotta.
But I'm just saying, casinos make me sick. Like everything is rigged against the player. They just roll in the money, and now somebody's winning a bit, and they got to clamp down on it. That's cheating. Like fuck you. If someone's good enough to count cards, that's a skill, and I respect it. Let them clean up. Fuck you guys. Anyway, I blabbed on about too many things. I don't want to talk about game shows or anything like that. Anyway,
We
enjoy
could-
your
we could talk
retirement,
for
Pat.
hours about
Enjoy
stuff.
your retirement, Pat Sajak. Seemed like a cool guy. I miss Alistair Beck. He was one of the best of us. And if I'm going to complain about society in general, as I said, Jeopardy is one of the last bastions of like intellectualism and rewarding being smart in our society. You know, we keep getting more and more anti-intellectual, more and more of these dumb people. They're not only dumb, but they're proud of being dumb. They're proud that they don't know things. They don't care about anything. They don't think anything's worth learning or knowing about. It makes me sick. And I don't care if I'm the opposite of that. I don't care if people want to say I'm a know-it-all and I like to show off how smart I am. Fine. Maybe we need more of that. Anyway, thanks very much for bearing with me tonight. I know I've got a little place, but we haven't done this in a while. But if there's any takeaway, I really like the movie, like Del Toro. We're definitely going to do more of his stuff in the future. And we are really, really fingers crossed hoping that we'll get more consistency as we head towards Christmas. So fingers crossed. Thanks so much, guys. And we'll see you hopefully pretty soon.
See ya. Thanks for watching.
Peace out. Good night.